Hey there, friends! I have something really special to share with you today, a story that will send shivers down your spine and keep you guessing with every twist and turn. It's called The Town with No Mirrors. Imagine a place where there are absolutely no mirrors, where people hide their reflections and fear what they might see. What could be so terrifying that they'd rather live without mirrors? As I take you on this spooky journey, be ready for some unsettling moments that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Here, we explore the scariest stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. To keep this channel growing, I'm begging you to subscribe and like this video. Your support truly motivates me. And don't forget to comment about where you're listening from. I'm curious to know your haunted locations. And guess what? While you listen, I have a fantastic weight loss dietary supplement to tell you about. Yes, you heard that right. This magical supplement can help you lose weight effortlessly, even while you're sleeping. Curious? Just click the link in the description below to learn more. Now, let's dive into the chilling story of The Town with No Mirrors. I arrived in a small town one foggy evening, feeling a strange sense of unease wrap around me like the mist. The cobblestone streets were quiet, and the houses looked old and worn, their windows dark and empty. Curiously, I noticed there were no mirrors anywhere, no shiny glass in homes, shops, or even in the town square. It was as if mirrors had never existed in this strange place. I wandered into a local cafe, hoping to find some answers. The smell of freshly baked bread filled the air, but the faces of the townspeople were blank and secretive. They glanced at me with wide eyes, but when I asked about the missing mirrors, they quickly changed the subject, talking about the weather or their pets. It was odd, unsettling. That night, as I lay in my creaky bed at the inn, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I pulled the blankets tight around me and tried to sleep, but strange noises echoed outside. It sounded like whispers, faint but clear. I got up to look through the window, but the darkness outside swallowed everything. The next day, I ventured to the market. People hurried past me, eyes fixed on the ground. I stopped an old lady who was arranging vegetables. "Why are there no mirrors?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. She looked up sharply, her expression turning to fear. "You shouldn't speak of such things," she whispered, glancing around as if someone might be listening. That afternoon, I decided to explore the town further. I stumbled upon an old library, its door creaking open as if inviting me in. Dust motes floated in the air, and shelves were lined with ancient books. As I flipped through one, I came across stories of shadows that could come alive at night, creatures that thrived on fear. The librarian, an elderly man, caught my eye and closed the book sharply. "Those stories are warnings," he said ominously. "Beware of what lies beneath." The more time I spent in the town, the more I began to feel an invisible weight pressing down on me. Shadows seemed to stretch longer than they should, and whispers fluttered in the corners of my mind. One evening, while near the edge of town, I caught a glimpse of something horrifying in the reflection of a shop window. It wasn't me staring back. It was a monstrous figure with hollow eyes and a twisted grin. Heart pounding, I ran back to the inn, frantically locking the door behind me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was following me, waiting for the cover of darkness. That night, the whispers grew louder outside my window, a cacophony of voices warning me to leave. I buried my head beneath the covers, desperate for sleep, but my heart raced with fear. Days passed, and I was determined to uncover the truth. I sought out a man known for his knowledge of legends. He told me of a curse that befell the town, a warning never to look too deeply at oneself, or one might uncover the hidden darkness inside. The townspeople, he explained, had become terrified of their reflections, fearing what they could unleash. Uneasy, I considered my own reflection. What if I saw something lurking there, waiting to escape? I resolved to find out. When night fell, I stood before the window, forcing myself to look deep into the darkness. At first, I saw nothing, just my frightened face staring back. But as the clock struck midnight, the air chilled. The whispers turned into a wail, and suddenly, a figure loomed behind me, long, twisted limbs reaching out, its hollow eyes fixed on mine. I screamed and ran, But the town seemed to shift around me. The streets twisted and turned, and every door was locked tight. Panicked, I could feel the presence of something dark drawing closer, pulling me into the abyss. I stumbled upon the old lady from the market again. "You've disturbed the shadows," she said, her voice trembling. "Now they will hunt you." With every passing moment, the fear grew unbearable. The townspeople watched from their doorways, mouths moving in silent chants, as if they were trapped in a strange ritual. I needed to escape, but every avenue seemed blocked by the supernatural force that held the town captive. Just as despair threatened to overcome me, I remembered the ancient books in the library. I raced back, heart pounding, the whispers growing louder in my ears. The library stood as a beacon of hope in the dark, its door welcoming me as I bolted inside. I tore through the shelves looking for answers, frantically flipping pages. Suddenly, the whispers merged into a chorus of screams, the shadows gathering around me like a storm. I found an old book with a spell that might break the curse. It required courage and the power to face what lay ahead. I took a deep breath, gathering all my strength. As I chanted the words, the shadows recoiled, and the air turned electric. The figure loomed closer, an embodiment of my fears. "Face me," it cried out, its voice a chilling echo. I felt the ground beneath me shake as I willed myself to confront the darkness. I looked into the shadow's eyes, and for a moment, I saw reflections of my own doubts and insecurities. I realized this wasn't just a monster trying to escape. This was part of me, the parts one feared most. And in that moment, I chose to embrace it. The shadows yelled and shrieked, twisting and swirling around me, but the spell resonated with power. A blinding light surged, illuminating the darkest corners of the library. The shadows began to dissolve, their whispers fading into silence. The townspeople rushed in, eyes wide with relief as they witnessed the transformation. They had long been prisoners of their own fears, bound by the terror of their reflections. They learned that facing the darkness within was the key to freedom. With the curse broken, mirrors reappeared throughout the town. The townsfolk slowly began to look into them, and I knew they would need time to heal from what had haunted them. But now, they had hope. As I prepared to leave, I felt a deep connection to this place and its people. They had faced their fears and chosen to embrace the light. But I will never forget the figure that had followed me, always a reminder of the shadows that lurk, waiting to be faced. As I walked away from the town, I knew that my story wasn't over. There were still many mysteries left to uncover, other shadows to chase. The town with no mirrors would remain in my heart, a haunting reminder of the unseen evils that hide within us all. I continued my journey away from the town, but the feeling of dread clung to me like a heavy fog. Even though I had helped break the curse, I couldn't shake the memories of the darkness I faced. As I walked, shadows seemed to stretch longer than they should, creeping along the ground as if they were alive. They whispered in a language I couldn't understand, chilling me to the bone. I spent the night in a nearby inn, hoping sleep would wash away the lingering fear. But as I lay in bed, every creak of the old building made my heart race. The wind howled outside, and the windows rattled, making it sound like someone was trying to get in. Suddenly, I heard soft knocks on my door, hesitant at first, then growing insistent. My heart pounded as I whispered, "Who's there?" No answer came, just the sound of heavy breathing outside the door. It felt like I was being watched. I slowly got up, holding my breath, and approached the door. When I peeked through the peephole, my stomach dropped. I saw the shadow of a figure, its outline flickering like a candle flame. My hands trembled, and I took a careful step back, afraid to open the door. I rushed to the window, hoping to see something familiar in the darkness. Outside, the moonlight cast eerie shapes on the ground, making the trees appear like twisted monsters. As I squinted, I saw the townsfolk slowly walking toward my inn, their eyes vacant, their movements slow and deliberate. They didn't seem to notice me at all. Instead, they started to chant, voices rising and swirling like a dark storm. I couldn't understand the words, but the tone filled me with dread. Feeling trapped, I darted to the back of the inn. I had to escape. I grabbed my things and slipped out through the kitchen. The air was colder here, and a strange fog rolled in, creeping along the ground and wrapping around my ankles like ghostly fingers. As I stepped outside, the chanting grew louder, an almost hypnotic rhythm echoing in my ears. I decided to head deeper into the woods behind the inn, away from the eerie townsfolk. The trees loomed like giants, their branches tangled and reaching out as if to grab me. Darkness enveloped me as I ventured further in, the moonlight barely piercing through the thick canopy above. The deeper I went, the more I felt eyes on me. Every rustle of leaves sounded like whispers, and I had the terrible feeling something was following, just out of sight. Suddenly, I tripped over a gnarled root and fell face first into the underbrush. Panic surged as I heard shuffling nearby. I quickly turned, heart racing, and saw a pair of glowing eyes peering at me from the darkness. They were teeming with hunger and malice. I scrambled to my feet and ran blindly, branches clawing at my arms as I pushed through the underbrush. The whispers grew louder, filling my mind with dread. "Face your fears. Face your fears," they taunted, each repetition feeling like a warning. Just as I thought I might escape, I stumbled into a clearing and froze. In the center stood a large, ancient tree, its trunk twisted and hollow, and beneath its roots lay something that made my skin crawl. Beneath the tree, the ground was stained dark red, like old blood, and I saw small, broken mirrors scattered around, their shards sparkling ominously. The air thickened with a suffocating energy, and I felt an icy presence surrounding me. I heard the whispers again, clearer this time, echoing out from the hollow tree. "Your reflection can show you more than you can handle," they hissed, and as I watched, shadows slithered from the tree, forming ghastly shapes that danced in the moonlight. They drifted toward me, their movements graceful yet threatening, swaying like smoke in a nightmare. I couldn't just stand there. I had to fight back. Gathering whatever courage I had, I remembered the spell I had chanted in the library. I closed my eyes and focused, channeling my fear into strength. But as I began to recite the words, the shadows lunged, and I opened my eyes to see a monstrous face emerge from the darkness, a reflection of my own inner demons, smiling wickedly. This was the true horror. I had to confront not just the shadows of the town, but the shadows of my own soul, the parts of myself I wished to hide even from my own reflection. The creature lunged at me with claws outstretched, but in that split second, something inside me switched. I stood my ground and shouted the last words of the spell, unleashing a bright light that filled the clearing. For a moment, everything stopped. The shadows halted in their tracks, and the air crackled with energy. The figure in front of me hesitated, and in that moment of weakness, I could see its tormented expression. It looked like me, twisted in pain, begging for release. I realized then that I wasn't just fighting a creature, but also the deepest parts of my fears. I wasn't alone in this battle. As I fought to strengthen the light, the shadows recoiled, and the whispers grew softer, turning into a lament. They seemed to cry out for understanding, for the acceptance I had denied them for so long. I felt a surge of empathy wash over me. Something started to echo back in my heart, a connection that spoke of acceptance, not fear. The ground beneath me vibrated. The shadows began to dissolve into the light, and the creature held its head down as if in defeat. I took a step forward, extending my hand toward it. "You are a part of me," I said softly, feeling the warmth of understanding. "You don't have to fight anymore." In that moment, the creature's form began to melt away, turning into swirling mist that spiraled back into the earth. As the last remnants of darkness vanished, I started to feel lighter, as if I had shed a weight I didn't even know I was carrying. The clearing was once again peaceful, and the broken mirrors absorbed the moonlight, sparking like stars on the forest floor. I took a breath, realizing that I had conquered not just the dark force of the town, but also the shadows within myself. But as the dawn began to break, I hesitated, fearing that the town would still hold its secrets. Would the people still be trapped in their fear? Resolute, I turned back towards the town, determined to help the townsfolk face their own reflections. I knew it wouldn't be easy, and there would be more challenges ahead. I gathered my strength and began walking back, my heart racing with anticipation and worry. As I approached the town, everything felt different. The streets appeared brighter, the air lighter. But when I stepped into the square, I took a sharp breath. The townspeople stood there, facing the newly restored mirrors that glimmered in the morning light. Their faces a mix of fear and curiosity. They looked just like me, caught between the urge to run and the need for understanding. This is not the end, I thought. It's just the beginning. The shadows may linger, but I vowed to help them face what had haunted them for so long. With every mirror, they would confront their fears head-on, and together, we could set ourselves free. As I stepped back into the town square, I could feel the tension in the air, thick and heavy like fog clinging to my skin. The townspeople were transfixed by the mirrors, their eyes reflecting a cocktail of emotions. Some looked terrified, while others appeared mesmerized by their own appearances, as if seeing themselves for the first time in years. I could feel a sense of urgency. It was the right moment to intervene, to guide them through this pivotal experience. You need to embrace what you see, I called out, my voice barely breaking through the thick silence. They looked toward me, some with frowns of confusion and others with a flicker of hope. Fear is only as strong as we allow it to be. Let the light in. As my words settled among them, I noticed a woman at the edge of the crowd with trembling hands, drawing closer to one of the mirrors. Her expression was a storm of emotions, longing, fear, and something else that I couldn't quite identify. She leaned in, eyes wide with the terror of what she might see. The others watched her, and I could sense that the weight of their collective fears bore down heavily in the air. She took a deep breath, closing her eyes for a moment. Then, slowly, she opened them as she gazed into the mirror. I held my breath, anticipating what would happen. Would she scream? Would she run? Instead, something unexpected occurred. Her reflection began to shift, warping into something grotesque and unfamiliar. The shadow from the depths of the mirror crawled out, reaching for her with jagged fingers. The crowd gasped collectively, and I felt my heart race. "Stay calm," I shouted, stepping forward. "It's only showing you a part of yourself that you need to understand." But the woman couldn't hear me. Fear gripped her, and she stumbled back, her face pale as her reflection snarled at her. The others watched in fear, frozen in place as if the scene had entranced them. The creature in the mirror twisted and writhed, its features a reflection of her inner turmoil, pain, and regret. I could see the townspeople looking at her with a mix of pity and horror, as if they, too, were watching a version of themselves in that nightmare. Suddenly, the whispers from earlier echoed through the square again, growing louder and more chaotic, swirling around us like a tornado of despair. "Face what lurks within," they screamed, and I could see the woman's reflection contorting in another grotesque form. The shadows began to seep from the mirror, shifting like dark ink spilled into water. With panic rising in my chest, I rushed toward her. "You are stronger than this darkness," I urged, trying to reach her through the terror. "Look into the reflection. Accept it as part of you." She hesitated, eyes darting between the mirror and my face. I could see the conflict within her, the battle between fear and acceptance displayed across her features. The shadows that had once seemed overwhelming now transformed into something that could be conquered. With one last, trembling breath, she steadied herself and looked deeper into the glass. All at once, the terrible creature intensified its assault, lashing out, trying to break free from the confines of the mirror. It roared, a chilling sound that threatened to swallow us whole. Her reflection screamed back, and I felt the vibrations of their voices crashing against my chest like bell tolling a warning, mixing the echoes of her fright with everything darker that dwelled in her soul. In that very moment, I knew we were at a true crossroads. I reached out, gripping the edge of the mirror, and shouted, "Let us in. Share your strength with us." My voice echoed through the square, reaching all the townsfolk who were still caught in the snares of their own fear. They needed to see that the true horror lay not in the monsters born of their reflections, but in the refusal to confront the darker sides of themselves. Pushing through the chaos, I beckoned the crowd to join me. Look into the mirrors, I urged them, knowing the power behind facing their own fears. Together, we can shine a light that will make the shadows retreat. One by one, hesitant at first, they approached the mirrors. The whispers grew furious, crying out warnings and mockery. But I stood firm, grounding myself in the belief that acceptance could break the chains binding us all. Soon, others began to stand by the woman, encouraging her silently with their presence. As they each touched the mirrors, the shadows clawed out, thrashing about wildly, but their resolve grew stronger. We formed a circle, the pulsing energy of our collective courage lighting the air. The crowd, previously isolated in their pain, now stood, united, each specter of their shadows, trying to break free only to find they were met with the strength of many hearts pushing back. Finally, the woman found her voice. "I refuse to be afraid," she exclaimed, her terror transforming into defiance. With that conviction, a light burst from within the mirror that filled the square with warmth. It pushed back the tendrils of darkness, causing the shadows to writhe and twist, shrieking in protest. The reflections morphed again. Each person began to see not just their inner fears, but also their potential for growth, their capacity for kindness, love, and courage. The creatures began to fade, slipping back into the mirrors, leaving only shimmering shards behind. As the last shadows vanished, a serene hush fell over the square. The people opened their eyes, looking at each other with a sense of awe and understanding. They slowly realized that they were free, that the chains of fear binding them had shattered, replaced by a deep connection to one another and the acceptance of their true selves. I felt tears welling in my eyes, a strange mixture of relief and joy. The townsfolk were no longer lost in their reflections, no longer prisoners of their own dread. They turned toward me, grateful smiles breaking across their faces, hearts lifted from the burden they had carried for so long. But even in that relief, I felt a flicker of concern. The experience had been intense, and while the shadows had receded for now, I knew they could return. The darkness was never fully defeated. It lay in wait, waiting for another moment of weakness. "Let us make a pact," I said firmly, stepping forward to gather their attention once more. "We must remember this day, cherish the light we found together. We can help each other face the darkness when it returns." With nods of agreement, the townsfolk encircled me. They began to share their stories, their struggles, and victories over fear. Each tale was a thread binding us closer together, creating a fabric of support that would protect against the shadows lurking at the edges of their lives. And as we spoke, a sense of unity replaced the lingering dread. But even as laughter echoed through the square, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched over my shoulder, a prickle on the back of my neck. The sun shone brightly, casting away the shadows of the night, yet the deep woods standing tall at the edge of town loomed ominously. I couldn't help but think that although we had triumphed, the story was far from over. I looked toward the trees, knowing that my journey was only just beginning. There were still secrets to uncover, still darkness to confront. What other stories lay hidden in the depths of the forest? Would there be new challenges that I couldn't predict? With determined resolve, I knew I had to explore the dark woods once again. Even though it was frightening, I understood now more than ever that facing the unknown was the only way to truly break free of the fear that dwelled within. Turning back to the town, I smiled at the friends I'd made. "Stay strong," I called, and as they waved goodbye, I felt empowered to confront whatever waited for me in the shadows. Taking a deep breath, I stepped toward the woods, each step echoing with anticipation. Who knew what haunted horrors still awaited me, just beyond the tree line? As I stepped toward the woods, the trees loomed taller than ever, their branches twisting like skeletal hands reaching out for me. A thin veil, of mist curled around the trunks, wrapping the landscape in an eerie silence that drowned out the sounds of the town. I could still feel the warmth of their smiles behind me, but the shadows of the forest beckoned with an unsettling allure. With each step deeper into the woods, the air grew colder, and a shiver trickled down my spine. I walked cautiously, my heart pounding a steady rhythm of fear and anticipation. Every rustle of leaves sent adrenaline flooding through my veins, making me hyper-aware of the darkness that surrounded me. I reached for the pocket flashlight I carried, turning it on to cut through the thickening gloom. The beam of light sliced through the murky darkness, catching glimpses of twisted roots and shadows playing tricks on my mind. Flickering glimpses of movement darted just outside my sight, but when I turned to look, nothing was there, only the heavy stillness. As I ventured further, I stumbled upon a clearing unlike any I had seen before. In the center stood an ancient stone well, covered in thick vines and moss, looking ominous against the backdrop of the darkening trees. The well appeared to be untouched by time, yet the air around it hummed with an unnatural energy. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was something evil, something that had been waiting for me. Drawn in, I approached the edge. Peering over the side, I saw endless darkness. A whisper of air escaped from within, sending a chill through my bones. "You shouldn't have come here." The wind seemed to echo, the words forming a haunting melody. The deeper I looked, the more I felt a pull, as if the well itself wanted to draw me into its depths. Was it just my imagination, or did I see faint flickers of light swirling down in the dark? My curiosity battled with fear as I reached for a small stone, dropping it into the well to test its depth. As it plinked against the sides, I listened for the sound to fade, but it never did, just an echoing silence, stretching into infinity. The chilling truth hit me like a weight in my stomach. Something in this place wasn't right. Just as I was about to step back, a soft whisper wound through the trees, swirling around me. "Help me!" It resonated from the well, taking root in my mind until I could feel my heart race anew. The pleading tone seemed desperate, filled with longing, as though someone was trapped below. Instinctively, I glanced around, my heart pounding loudly in my ears. The shadows shifted, dark shapes blending into the trees, watching as I stood frozen in place. It felt like I was surrounded, as if the woods themselves were alive, hungry for what I might uncover. "Who's there?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. I grasped the flashlight tighter, sweeping the beam around to find any signs of life. As the light passed over the well again, I noticed a faint outline forming just above the edge, a woman shrouded in darkness, her features barely discernible but filled with sorrow. Her eyes glimmered like shards of glass, reflecting my own fear back at me. "Help me, please," she whispered, her voice softer now, almost tender. I could see her mouth move, but the words came out like a gust of wind. My blood ran cold at the sight of her outstretched hand, coated in dirt and grime, reaching toward me as if in desperation. My instincts screamed to run, but I stood frozen to the ground, a mix of terror and sympathy battling inside me. "How can I help you?" I managed to whisper, my throat dry and constricted. The woman nodded, her movements graceful yet disjointed, like a marionette with tangled strings. "Take the rope," she instructed, gesturing to a frayed length that hung from the well. "Bring me up?" I hesitated, knowing something sinister loomed beneath the surface of her plea. Was she a victim, or was this a trap, another shadow waiting to pull me into the abyss? The whispers around me faded, replaced by the pounding of my heartbeat in my ears. I made a decision, moving slowly toward the rope, feeling drawn to her pain. "I can't leave you here," I said, determination strengthening my resolve even as fear coiled around me. Grabbing the rope, I tested its strength before tying it securely around the well's edge. "Hold on," I yelled, preparing to lower myself in, but her expression shifted, and the light flickering around her began to dim. "No, not yet." Suddenly the air changed. The comforting warmth I had felt earlier vanished, replaced by a bone-chilling cold that surged from the depths of the well. A shadow shifted behind her, clawed hands reaching upward, and I froze, eyes wide with horror, as I realized something was wrong. "Run!" she screamed, not at me, but at something behind her. The darkness erupted, and I stumbled back, the flashlight flickering wildly as I watched the shadow pull her into the well. A sinister laugh echoed through the clearing, a voice twisted by malice. "You think you can escape?" In a panic, my mind raced. I turned to run, but the ground beneath me shifted as the trees closed in, their roots snaking across the forest floor like tendrils out for blood. The shadows shifted again, swirling in a chaotic dance of darkness, blocking my path back toward the safety of the town. The chilling laughter echoed again, a cacophony of voices merging into a single entity, intertwining fears that seemed to feed off my terror. "You're part of this now," it taunted, sound wrapping around me like chains. The whispers grew louder, pressuring me, disorienting. With every ounce of willpower, I fought against the terror gripping my heart. "I will not be afraid," I shouted into the darkness. But just as I pushed forward, I tripped over a root, stumbling into a thicket of prickly bushes that clawed at my skin. I landed hard, gasping for breath, the sharpness of the world around me fading into the background as the laughter turned into harsh whispers. "Turn back," the shadows murmured, wrapping around me like fog. "You cannot fight what's inside." It was almost mocking. My heart raced, battling against the unseen terror that threatened to swallow me whole. The laughter twisted into something darker, sinister echoes that seeped into my mind. I could feel my resolve waning, the battle against the shadows shifting within me. I knew the innocence of my journey had shattered. This was no longer just a quest to help others confront their fears. It was a test of my strength, my will to face what lay buried deep within myself. I struggled to my feet, brushing the dirt and leaves from my clothes, knowing I was not just fighting for survival, but also facing something far more insidious. "I will find the light," I screamed again, my voice cutting through the chaos. The shadows recoiled momentarily, and in that instant of hesitation, I realized I had the power to change the narrative. Inspiration surged within me as I focused on the light I had felt earlier in the town, the warmth of unity, the strength of shared struggles. I closed my eyes and concentrated on that energy, allowing it to fill me. The shadows shrieked as I directed the energy outward, forming a beam of light that cut through the encroaching darkness. The forest quaked, the laughter faltering as the power of my resolve surged forth. I willed the light to push through the darkness, to dispel the fears that had held me captive. As the shadows fell back, a path began to clear before me. Triumphant, I stepped forward, ready to confront whatever lurked at the edge of my understanding. I could feel the forest trembling, the spirits within sensing the shift. I was no longer a victim of my fears. Instead, I was a warrior, and the darkness itself wanted to hide from my newfound strength. Emboldened, I moved deeper into the woods, determined to uncover the truth hidden in the shadows. Beneath the surface, something called to me, a promise of understanding, a chance to put the past to rest and emerge forever changed from this encounter. But as I advanced, an overwhelming presence loomed ahead, and I knew I wasn't done yet. What awaited me at the heart of this darkness? What else would I need to confront on this journey of self-discovery? My heart raced, and for the first time, anticipation mixed with nerves as I ventured further into the unknown. As I pressed further into the woods, the shadows thickened around me, pressing in like a vice. The air turned strange and cold, almost electric, sending an unsettling chill through my bones. I could feel the weight of the darkness closing in, a palpable presence that felt like it was watching me, waiting for me to falter. Suddenly, the trees parted, revealing an ancient stone archway. It rose tall and jagged, with vines woven through its crumbling surface, looking like a mouth gaping wide in a sinister grin. The moment I approached, an uncomfortable sensation washed over me. It was as if time itself had frozen at the edge of this threshold. An enthralling, Sinister energy hummed from within, drawing me closer despite the fear nagging at the back of my mind. Do I dare walk through? I muttered to myself, glancing back toward the town, a distant memory filled with warmth and laughter. But my curiosity outweighed my fear, and I stepped through the archway, feeling a strange tug at my very essence. A soft whisper echoed around me, tempting me forward. As I crossed the threshold, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. The vibrant greens of the forest dulled into eerie shades of gray. The ground crunched underfoot like glass, each step sending shivers down my spine. I felt an unseen weight pressing against me, a warning that I was entering a realm where dread and despair thrived. Ahead stood a path lined with twisted, gnarled trees, their branches clawing at the sky like skeletal fingers. As I walked, a sense of foreboding shrouded the air, making it hard to breathe. The only sound was the occasional rustle of leaves, a reminder that I wasn't truly alone. In the dim light, shadows flickered at the corners of my vision, vanishing whenever I turned to look. Then I saw it, a flicker of movement near an old, dilapidated mansion looming in the distance. It was oppressive and massive, the windows dark like hollow eyes watching me, daring me to approach. Layers of ivy sprawled across the facade, hinting at years of neglect. For a brief moment, doubt crept into my mind. Should I turn back? But something held me there, something powerful that whispered I needed to unravel whatever darkness lay ahead. I took a step toward the mansion, the ground trembling beneath me. Every instinct screamed at me to flee, yet I felt drawn to uncover the secrets hidden inside. As I approached, the front door creaked open with a slow, exaggerated groan, revealing a dark hallway that seemed to suck in the light. I hesitated, then stepped inside, the chill in the air wrapping around me like a fog. Inside, the atmosphere altered dramatically. The air thickened, carrying a scent of dampness and decay. Walls lined with peeling wallpaper seemed to close in, and I could hear the unmistakable sound of whispers drifting through the halls. The echoes of sorrow clung tight to the walls, telling tales of despair long forgotten. I moved cautiously, the floorboards creaking under my weight like a warning. With every step, I felt the chill creeping closer. Shadows flickered just out of sight, playing tricks on my eyes. I could almost hear the mansion breathing, its sighs mingling with the whispers echoing through the darkness. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from the room to my left, causing my heart to leap in my chest. I turned sharply, my flashlight beam slicing through the gloom, illuminating dusty relics of a bygone era. The air was thick with an unnatural silence, and I took a deep breath, steeling myself to push through the fear gnawing at my insides. As I drew nearer, the door swung open just slightly. Imbued with an unsettling energy, it beckoned me closer. I reached out hesitantly, grasping the cold handle and swinging it wide. The room inside was a stark contrast, illuminated by a flickering golden light, casting long shadows that danced along the walls. Strange symbols were drawn into the floor, pulsating with an eerie glow. In the center of the room lay an ornate mirror, its surface shimmering with an otherworldly light. As I stepped closer, I caught sight of myself reflected back in the glass. But my reflection didn't look right. My eyes were dark, almost soulless, and an unsettling grin split my face wider than it should. I recoiled, heart pounding madly. What was this place? The mirror seemed to call out to me, its surface rippling with an unsettling energy. My reflection, although distorted, spoke silently, urging me to come nearer. Face your truth, it seemed to say, its voice a tantalizing whisper. Embrace what you fear. Apprehensively, I glanced around the dim room, the shadows pooling in threatening corners, hiding secrets I wasn't ready to uncover. But I felt the pull again, stronger this time, igniting a fierce curiosity within me. What truth lay hidden in the depths of the reflection? With trembling hands, I reached out to touch the surface of the mirror, prepared to confront whatever awaited me. My fingers brushed against the cool glass, and suddenly, The image morphed violently, revealing a dark scene swirling behind my reflection. I watched in horror as shadows played out snippets of my past. What I saw left me breathless, memories twisted by darkness. Moments of regret and fear danced before me, each image more disturbing than the last. I could hear the echoes of my own voice, filled with doubt and sorrow, swirling around me. I staggered back, the truth crashing over me like a relentless tidal wave. Not just one, the shadows whispered again, surging forth from the depths of the mirror. They twisted into forms before my eyes, familiar faces, distorted and anguished, each bearing witness to my past mistakes. "You're never alone in your suffering," I gasped, understanding dawning on me with terrifying clarity. These weren't just my fears. They were the burdens I had cast aside, each pleading silently for recognition. The shadows coiled tighter around me, hungry for my deepest insecurities, threatening to drag me into the darkness if I didn't find a way to confront them. "Leave me be," I shouted, struggling against the suffocating pressure as the shadows writhed. But they only tightened their grip, forcing me to feel the weight of each mistake, every choice that had led me here. A mournful voice filled the air, the woman from the well now among the shadows. "We are all part of this, intertwined by regret and fear." Panic surged within me, but amidst the chaos, a spark ignited. My resolve solidified. I would not let fear consume me. "I will confront you," I declared, gathering the strength I had discovered earlier in the forest. I refused to succumb. With every ounce of determination I could muster, I concentrated on that light, envisioning the collective warmth and unity I had experienced back in the town. The darkness flickered at the edges of my resolve, but I pushed forward, forcing the light of recognition through the shadows. The air crackled and pulsed, shadows contorting as my memories surged forth, each one wrestling for supremacy. But I focused on the emotions, the pain, the regret, but also the lessons learned. Each memory carried a weight, and I released them into the light. "I own this," I shouted, feeling my power surge as I embraced each fragment of the past. As the shadows shrieked in anger and despair, I felt the energy shift, the oppressive weight lifting. The darkness began to dissipate, unraveling like smoke in the wind, revealing glimmers of hope illuminating the room. I could see the faces of those trapped in the shadows fade, their whispers turning into cries of relief. Finally, the last remnants of darkness collapsed, leaving the room bright and still. The mirror's surface shimmered, now reflecting not only my image but a vision of strength and resilience. I could finally see myself as I was meant to be, but as I stood there, triumphant yet shaken, something shifted again. A low growl echoed from deep within the mansion, reverberating through the walls, shaking the foundation beneath me. A dark presence stirred, pulsing with rage, warning me that my journey was far from over. "Flee while you can," echoed a voice amid the chaos, the remnants of the shadows clawing at the edges of my consciousness. I was on borrowed time, the very essence of the mansion refusing to let me go. With a final glance at the mirror, I steeled my resolve, feeling the weight of my newfound strength. I turned, racing for the door, adrenaline coursing through me as I bolted back through the hallway, darkness nipping at my heels. I could feel it gaining ground, feeling its cold breath against my neck. As I burst through the front door, the night air rushed over me like a tidal wave, the coolness against my skin a stark contrast to the suffocating heat inside. I stumbled, gasping for breath, heart racing wildly as I looked back at the mansion standing menacingly in the moonlight. The whispers of the shadows still echoed in my ears, the growling almost palpable, warning me of something yet unfurling. I knew this wasn't the end. Shadows lingered, lurking at the edges of my reality, waiting for another moment of weakness to claw their way back into my life. With a deep breath, I turned toward the dark path leading back into the deeper woods. The urge to flee flooded through me, but deep down, I knew I had to confront what awaited me in the darkness once more. I would face whatever horrors lay hidden within, because this journey wasn't just about escaping the darkness. It was about understanding it, and in doing so, reclaiming the light within myself. As I stood on the threshold of the wood, a strange sensation started to creep up my spine, like fingers of ice trailing along my skin. The forest whispered secrets I wasn't ready to hear, and every instinct in my body screamed at me to run, to escape this suffocating atmosphere. Yet, something deeper inside me urged me to press forward, to unravel the mystery entwined in these woods. With each step deeper into the trees, the shadows lengthened and twisted, becoming creatures of their own. The moon hung low, casting a ghostly silver light that danced off the surfaces around me. It felt as though the darkness shifted and breathed, surrounding me like a thick fog that bore witness to every fleeting thought. The whispers escalated, swirling around me, probing my resolve. I could almost make out words now, the echoes of anguish shaken loose from the earth itself. "Help us," they pleaded, overlapping and blending into a haunting melody that surged in waves. I turned sharply, my heart racing, the whispering chorus resonating with the heartbeat of the forest. What sort of spirits were trapped here? And what did they want from me? Strange visions flickered through my mind, scenes of the mansion expanding until it devoured all the surrounding woods. A sudden impulse compelled me to delve further, as if the very trees were directing my path. I stumbled over roots, my footing faltering. A thick mist rolled in, wrapping around my ankles, rising higher until it felt alive, cradling me like a mother's embrace, or perhaps like a lover's grasp, both familiar yet terrifying. Every so often, I glimpsed fleeting shadows darting in and out among the trees, their shapes twisting and melding into grotesque forms. The more I focused, the less they appeared as mere shadows. They took on distinct human features, faces etched in despair, twisted into expressions of tragic fury. Each visage carried an echo of pain, betrayal, longing, and heartbreak as they pointed towards the heart of the forest, urging me onward. With a pounding pulse and biting cold wrapping around my throat, I pressed deeper, drawn by an unseen force. The air thickened, becoming almost syrupy, and breathed in the scent of damp earth and rotten leaves. I could sense it, the power of despair accumulating, a darkness eager to snare anyone who dared to venture into the depths. Then, without warning, I stumbled into a clearing where the ground opened up suddenly, revealing a massive sinkhole. It gaped like a mouth, ready to swallow anything that dared approach. The edges of the pit were littered with twisted, dead branches and stones, like the remnants of sacrificial offerings. My heart raced as an overwhelming feeling of dread surged within me, telling me this was a place where souls came to die, not just physically, but spiritually. From the depths of the hole, the whispers grew louder, now frantic and desperate. Join us, they beckoned. I peered over the edge, my heart racing in rhythm with the whispers. Below, an inexplicable glow pulsed, casting eerie light on twisted shapes writhing in uncertainty. What lay beneath the surface? Were they the lost souls, trapped and restless forever? Suddenly, I realized I wasn't alone in this clearing. Eyes appeared in the shadows surrounding me, glowing with an unnatural light. I froze as figures emerged from the darkness, faces just out of reach, forcing me to confront the reality of what I felt. Each of them held an aura of sorrow, their eyes dark and haunted, pleading for an escape I wasn't sure how to grant. One particularly chilling figure stepped forward, a woman with long hair hanging down like tangled vines. Her face was ashen, features sunken, yet her eyes bore a fierce intensity. "You've come seeking answers, but you must pay the price," she said in a whispering hiss that sent a shiver down my spine. "You cannot leave until you offer something of equal value." I felt the weight of her gaze. What did they want from me? A piece of my soul? My memories? I swallowed hard, glancing back at the swirling darkness. The bite of regret nibbled at my thoughts. It was heavy. The tendrils of my recent past rushed forward. Moments I had pushed aside, weighed down by shame and despair. "Are you willing to sacrifice your past?" she asked, stepping closer until I could see the flecks of despair swirling in her eyes. "We can give you peace in return." Her words hung thick in the air, and I could feel the shadows creeping closer, intertwining with my thoughts. I took a shaky breath. Could I relinquish those memories, the burdens I carried? The thought frightened me, pushing back against something deep in my core. I don't know," I whispered, feeling the room shift as if it too held its breath, waiting for my response. The spirits remained silent, their eyes piercing into my soul, searching for weakness. I sensed their desperation. They were bound by their own mistakes, and perhaps they saw a fragile reflection of themselves in my struggle. The ground began to tremble beneath us, a low rumble that reverberated along my spine. "The choice must be made," the woman hissed again, her face twisting, growing darker, more distorted than before. "Or you shall join us, forever." Intuition kicked in, urging me to escape, but I couldn't move. I was chained between my past and the eerie allure of the beings surrounding me. The pressure built, clamoring for release. A spark of courage ignited within. If I had to confront something, it would be my fear. I took a step back, raising my chin. "No," I declared, my voice breaking through the tumult. "I won't trade my past for your peace. I will face whatever it is I must." A deafening silence followed my proclamation, and the shadows recoiled, murmurs turning into angry growls. The figures began to dissipate into mist, their haunting whispers filled with disbelief and rage. But the woman stood firm, her form flickering as if struggling against the light beginning to radiate from within me. "You think you could break free?" she challenged, her tone laced with sharp contempt. "You are too far gone. All paths lead back here." In that moment, I sensed a deep connection. This darkness was both a part of me and not. My past mistakes, my regrets, haunting memories that I could either surrender to or reclaim. A choice lingered, vibrating in the air, drawing forth everything I had learned in this dark journey. I closed my eyes and reached deep inside myself. Harnessing the light I had found in the forest, I pulled forth every ounce of strength, lighting it like a flame. It surged through me, breaking through the suffocating fog, casting shadows away. As the light expanded, the woman shrieked, a sound filled with anguish, hatred, and fear. I felt the pressure ease as the spirits around me lost their connection. They were fading, slipping away back into the realm from whence they came, and I felt something shift within me. The world around me brightened, washing away despair and regret. The shadows melted into glimmers of light, illuminating the sinkhole as if revealing a hidden truth below, a reflection of my journey. I saw the faces of those I had lost, memories of laughter and sorrow intertwining in a chaotic dance. Suddenly, once again, something stirred violently from the depths of the sinkhole, rising like a dark wave. A deep growl rumbled through the air, shaking the ground beneath me. It felt as if the very essence of the forest was retaliating against my defiance. "Turn back," it screamed, the voice echoing all around me, filling the air with a palpable sense of dread. I felt my heart thunder, my pulse racing as fear clawed at me from the inside. The ground shook harder, and I knew I had to act fast. I spun to leave the clearing, feeling the pull of darkness rise behind me. Branches snapped and crumbled in its wake, a chaotic whirlwind of rage that swirled through the air like a tempest. I ran, adrenaline coursing, dodging trees as they seemed to close in around me, the whispers now a cacophony of anguished cries. "You cannot escape." I could hear the vicious laughter echoing from every direction, clawing toward me, relentless and hungry. The more I ran, the more the shadows chased me, shadows that had morphed into monstrous forms, stretching wide with elongated limbs and eyes of pure malice. As I stumbled through the underbrush, I could sense them gaining ground, could feel the icy breath trailing behind, closing in like unyielding chains. Heart pounding within my chest, I pushed forward, desperately searching for a way out, a glimmer of hope amid the turmoil plaguing my mind. Just as I was about to lose all faith, I spotted a flicker of light up ahead, a barely discernible break in the trees. Could it be an exit? With every ounce of strength, I sprinted towards it, the darkness clawing hungrily at my heels. I refused to look back, focused solely on the sliver of light that promised escape. But as I reached the edge of the clearing, an ear-splitting roar echoed behind me, sending shockwaves through the trees. The world vibrated around me, and I could feel the malevolence surge as I stepped into the brightness. I needed to break free, to sever the ties that bound me to this place of terror. With one final burst of energy, I leaped through the opening, light bursting around me as I was engulfed in blinding brilliance. The shadows struggled to follow, a mass of enraged whispers growing faint as I surged forward into the warmth. But then it hit me, an overwhelming truth, that darkness would always linger. I had uncovered a layer of light within, but the shadows still waited, lurking just outside the edge of my consciousness. I would have to confront them again someday, perhaps in another moment of weakness. Yet right now, I was free, a tide of warmth wrapping around me. I was alive and ready to face whatever came next in this quest of unearthing my undeniable truths. I took a moment to gather myself, the warm light wrapping around me like a blanket. But even as I stood there, chest heaving and heart racing, the unsettling echoes of the forest still lingered, haunting me as if they were sewn into the very fabric of the air. I knew that what I had just encountered would not go away quietly. As I cautiously stepped forward, a creeping doubt gnawed at my mind. Had I truly escaped, or was it merely a temporary reprieve? I could feel Thea as I stumbled out into the light. The forest around me seemed to shift and fade, like a nightmare receding at dawn. I took a moment to breathe, the air cool against my skin, cleansing in a way, yet the unease still lingered. I could feel an ebbing darkness behind me, clawing at the edges of my memory, reminding me that I hadn't truly escaped. When I glanced over my shoulder, there was nothing but the dense forest, shadows merged with the underbrush. I could still hear faint echoes of whispers drifting on the wind, a reminder of the malevolent presence I had left behind. It felt surreal, almost like waking from a dream, but with that unnerving sense that something was still there, waiting in the shadows. Determined to regain my composure, I continued walking, heart still racing. The path ahead became increasingly twisted, vines and branches reaching out from every side. The forest reclaimed its territory around me, closing in as if to ensure that I would never leave. Suddenly, a heavy fog rolled in, obscuring my view. It was thick, swirling around my feet, clawing at my ankles like icy fingers. I called out to the stillness, my voice echoing into the abyss. "Hello? Is anyone there?" The only answer was a chilling silence that sank into the pit of my stomach. Just as I thought I was alone, I heard a rustle to my left, the sound of something moving, although I could see nothing through the dense haze. My heart quickened, and I felt a rush of adrenaline course through me. I tried to force my legs to move, but they felt heavy, almost leaden. That very moment, the fog thickened, enveloping me, wrapping around me like a shroud. It obscured my path, turning familiar trees into looming figures, grotesque and unidentified. I could almost hear the heartbeats of unseen creatures, thrumming with energy, and I knew I was not alone. The whispers returned, clearer now, swirling in the fog like ominous echoes. "Stay with us," they lured. "You belong here." A shiver ran down my spine. I didn't belong anywhere near this place. I concentrated, forcing myself to remember the light I had found within, the strength I had harnessed. With a sudden surge, I tore through the fog, my palms brushing against bark and twisted branches. But the moment I broke free, I wished I hadn't. I had emerged into a graveyard of twisted trees, their gnarled trunks forming grotesque shapes, like body parts frozen in time. The air was thick with the scent of decay, heavy and suffocating, and the shadows around the trees pulsed as if they were alive. Each tree bore a face carved into its bark, expressions twisted in eternal anguish. I stood frozen, caught in a trance, my eyes roaming over them as they seemed to watch me, pleading. "Help us," they murmured in unison, the voices merging into an overwhelming chorus of despair. "No!" I screamed, instinctively stepping back, but the ground crunched beneath my feet, the dead leaves responding to my movements, like a warning whispered through the air. The trees leaned closer, their branches clawing at the sky, as though trying to escape their roots. I felt the ground tremble beneath me, a low and growling pulse. In that moment, I turned on my heels and ran, needing to escape this nightmare. I sprinted deeper into the forest, the mist swirling around me, and yet the whispers were relentless. "You can't run from us. You are ours now." The energy around me shifted again, morphing into something primal, something unrelenting. As I fled, I stumbled into a clearing filled with strange totems. Sticks and bones crudely assembled into grotesque shapes, each bearing disturbing symbols that seemed to tell stories of pain and suffering. They all pointed inward toward a gaping pit in the center, typical of some forgotten ritual site, and a chilling sensation gripped my stomach. Without thinking, I backed away from the pit, but by doing so, I stumbled onto a twisted root that snagged my foot. I toppled forward into the clearing, face first into the leaves, the silence abruptly piercing my senses. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears, fear clawing at me as I glanced back at the darkness lying in wait. There was something in that pit, a deep, swirling darkness that beckoned to me. Despair washed over me, intertwining with the lingering spectral voices still taunting me. I could feel a presence rising from it, a shadow shifting and swirling, taking form before my eyes. An outline slowly emerged, tall and menacing. It loomed over me with eyes like smoldering coals, glowing in the darkness. "What do you seek?" it asked, its voice a deep rumble that seemed to shake the air around me. "You have trespassed into our domain, and now we know your true intentions." I scrambled to my feet, heart racing as the entity whispered, moving closer. "You hide from the truth," it hissed. "You cannot escape your past. We will show you." Panicking, I turned to run, adrenaline coursing through me. But the moment I did, weightless vines sprang forth from the pit, coiling around my ankles, dragging me back toward that gaping maw. "No!" I kicked and thrashed, but the more I fought, the tighter they constricted. I felt the pull of the pit's darkness, drawing me down toward whatever lay beyond. Disorientation flooded through me, and I panicked, realizing I was teetering on the brink of something much bigger than myself. The world spun around me, and I could see the faces of the tormented spirits emerging like apparitions from the mist. "Join us, be free," they crooned, their insistent whispers weaving through my mind, mingling with the shadows closing in on me. I was losing myself, and all I could think about was the fragile light I held. But then, something shifted inside me. I couldn't lose sight of that light, the flicker of hope guiding me through the darkness. Drawing on every ounce of my strength, I focused hard, picturing my victories over pain, my fight against despair. I knew I had to rekindle that spark. "Enough!" I shouted, summoning all my power. The vines recoiled, loosening their grip slightly as I declared, "I will not fall into your darkness." With all my might, I pushed against the pull of the pit, channeling everything I had discovered on this harrowing journey. The shadows roared in fury, like a storm crashing against the very essence of my will. The ground shook violently, and I felt the weight of both light and darkness battling within me. I poured every ounce of determination into that small fire burning inside, every rejection of fear growing ever-consuming. Suddenly, the darkness exploded into a blinding light, surrounding me, pushing back against the shadows. The pit trembled as it erupted, a shockwave ripping through the air in a fleeting moment of silence. In the heart of that brilliance, I saw faces of those I loved, moments I cherished flooding back, shielding me from the grasp of despair. I let out a fierce cry, channeling strength into my voice as I thrust my hands forward, unleashing the light against the entities surrounding me. As the light engulfed me, the shadows wailed and twisted, disintegrating into a cloud of darkness. The ground fell silent, and I felt the bindings of the past slip away. I was no longer tethered to the sorrow, but instead, I was shaking free of the shadows that had once stalked my every step. With that release, I stumbled backward, crashing onto the ground, panting as the light began to fade. I could see the forest starting to settle, the eerie, tense atmosphere lifting, but I knew the battle was far from over. The lingering whispers began to simmer down, but the shadows in the distance pulsed with undying hunger, hinting that they were still waiting, lurking just beyond my vision. "Now you face the truth," a voice murmured softly, echoing around me. I felt the cold presence behind me, bound not just to the forest, but also to my own darkness, the fight not yet finished. Gathering my strength, I rose again, determined to confront these shadows. The light within me flickered like a candle in the wind, but I had felt its power and knew that I could stand against whatever awaited me. I took a deep breath and with newfound resolve, stepped forward into the heart of the forest once more, knowing full well that the challenge ahead would demand everything I had left. With every step deeper into the forest, the weight of silence pressed down on me, heavier than the darkness that clung to the trees. I could feel the air shift, oppressive and thick, as if it were holding its breath, waiting for me to act. I clutched my fists, feeling the pulse of light within me, a flickering beacon in the encroaching dread. As I navigated through the twisted branches and roots, shadows danced at the corners of my vision. They felt alive, whispering of forgotten tales and anguished souls. The path twisted again, narrowing into a desolate alleyway between the towering trees. Each stride echoed ominously, amplifying the unease that gnawed at my insides. It was a reminder that I was returning to where it all began, to the heart of their world. Suddenly, a sharp rustle broke the silence to my right. I froze, instinctively turning, heart racing. I half expected something monstrous to leap from the undergrowth, but instead, I was met with nothing. Just another empty space staring back at me, the trees looming like silent sentinels. I took a tentative breath, convincing myself it was merely my imagination. But deep within, the feeling of being watched crackled in the air. As I moved forward, the forest seemed to shift around me, roots twisting in unnatural angles and branches creating grotesque shapes against the pale moonlight. I approached a shattered tree trunk, the bark splintered, revealing the vivid red sap oozing from its wounds. It looked like blood, like the forest itself was weeping. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was encroaching on a sacred ground, somewhere I was never meant to tread. Then a whisper floated through the air, chilling my spine. "Turn back," it breathed, the voice echoing as if from the very earth beneath my feet. I shuddered, taking a step back, but curiosity pulled me forward. What awaited me deeper inside this haunted realm? As I continued, shadows flickered between the trees, dancing just out of sight. I heard a rustling sound, like the crackle of dry leaves, but layered with something more sinister, like laughter twisted into madness. The previous silence turned into a cacophony of unsettling sounds, shuffling feet, and whispers wrapped around me, drawing me deeper into the depths of the forest's darkened heart. Each step felt like an invitation into a nightmarish realm. Memories flickered in my mind, faces of those I loved, interspersed with memories I wished to bury. The distance blurred, past colliding with present, and dread coiled tighter around me with every heartbeat. I moved as if in a trance, feeling tugged along by unseen hands. Then, abruptly, the air shifted again, a chill creeping up my spine as if icy fingers were brushing against my skin. I found myself standing before a clearing, the atmosphere pulsating with unease. Before me lay a circle of stones, ancient and covered in lichen, with strange symbols carved into the surface. The ground beneath felt wrong, like a heartbeat quickening beneath the dirt. As I took another step, the ground began to tremble beneath me, and the symbols on the stones flickered with a dim light that pulsed rhythmically. My heart sank, and I realized I stood before what could only be an altar of sorts, a site of terrible rituals long since forgotten. Suddenly, an ear-piercing wail echoed from behind me, freezing my breath in my throat. I spun around just in time to see a figure emerging from the shadows, a gaunt entity, all angles and shadows, with hollowed cheeks and sunken eyes. It was the embodiment of despair, shrouded in an aura of dread that sent waves of terror crashing over me. "Why do you disturb us?" it hissed, voice raspy like dry leaves scraping against stone. Its gaze bore into mine, a reflection of all my fears, all the shadows I had fought to escape. I felt my pulse quicken, my instincts screaming at me to flee, yet I was rooted to the spot, caught in the grip of a nightmare. With a sudden jolt, the figure lunged toward me, reaching out with skeletal fingers. I stumbled back, nearly losing my footing, but the shadows coiled around my legs, trapping me. I gasped, forcing my mind to summon the flicker of light within. Even as the threat loomed closer, the rancid scent of fear tainting the air. "Your past cannot be escaped," the entity mocked, inching closer. "You will join them, join us, here among the lost." The walls of the clearing seemed to close in, shifting the earth and swallowing all hope as despair clawed at my chest. I felt the shadows pressing against me, whispering secrets of hopelessness, and it took everything I had not to break, not to succumb to the darkness surrounding me. Summoning every ounce of courage, I drew forth the light within until it soared into a searing blaze, flooding the clearing with brilliance. The shadows recoiled, hissing in agony, but the figure stood firm, grim determination written across its face. "You cannot resist forever," it uttered, voice echoing ominously, filled with malice that sent chills racing down my spine. "We are eternal. We will always return." With a surge, I lunged toward the circle, hoping that somehow if I reached the stones, I could sever the ties binding me to this cursed place. As I approached, the flickering light from the symbols flared brighter, illuminating the runes. I could feel an energy thrumming through the air, wrapping around me like a warm embrace. But it felt unstable, like a fragile thread about to snap. The ground trembled violently as the entity caught up to me, its fingers clawing through the air, pulling me back toward darkness. I could hear its laughter, warped and echoing, combining with the whispers of spirits pleading to reclaim me. I reached the edge of the stone circle, the symbols lit with an otherworldly glow, and in that moment of desperation, I pressed my palms against the cool surface. The heat surged through me, an unexpected charge coursing through every fiber of my being. Below my fingertips, the runes pulsed, resonating with my very essence. The aura around me exploded with light, washing away the oppressive cold, and the entity writhed in rage, shadows swirling around us. I could hear the agonized wails of spirits, their voices crying out, merging with my own fury. "Let go of me!" I yelled, my voice joining the chorus of defiance against the darkness that sought to claim me. "I choose my own path." And with that declaration, a blinding surge erupted from the stones, engulfing the clearing, illuminating the terrified faces of spirits trapped in shadows. Time seemed to freeze as light erupted in a whirlwind, swirling violently around me, pushing back the darkness that had suffocated hope. But amidst the chaos, I could feel the familiar weight of despair lingering at the edges, still just out of reach. I had broken their grasp now, but somehow I knew that this wasn't the end. The shadows couldn't be banished forever. They were a part of me, haunting strains that would always linger in the corners of my mind. As the light flickered, the entity faded back into the shadows, its laughter trailing off into the night. I stood amidst the glow, panting, heart still racing, yet knowing this victory would only quell the storm temporarily. The forest once again settled, a false sense of calm washing over me. But there was no denying the unsettling fact that I felt watched, the shadows lurking just beyond the reach of the light I had created. I could still hear faint echoes drifting through the trees, reminding me that I wasn't done yet. I turned to face the open path behind me, where shadows claimed dominion. I had to press onward, knowing somewhere ahead lay answers waiting to be unveiled. The light within flickered, and I couldn't help but shiver at the thought of descending further into this haunting labyrinth. But with resolve solidifying in my chest, I moved forward again, embracing the eerie sense of dread and anticipation as I plunged deeper into the dark heart of the forest. With each step deeper into the dark heart of the forest, an unsettling energy wrapped around me, squeezing tight like a vice. The air felt electric, charged with an eerie anticipation, and every rustle of leaves sounded like distant whispers conspiring just out of sight. Shadows danced along the edges of my vision, twisting and squirming as though they had a life of their own. I could almost hear their secrets calling to me, but I was determined to move forward, the flickering light inside urging me on. Soon, I found myself in another clearing, this one strangely different from the last. The moon hung low, casting an unnatural glow over a series of grotesque statues that had been half buried in the earth. Their faces were contorted in expressions of terror, mouths open in silent screams, as if they had witnessed something so horrifying that it had turned them to stone. I felt a chill crawl down my spine as I approached, the ground crunching beneath my feet, each step marked with weighty significance. As I examined the nearest statue, its eyes seemed to follow me, a hollow gaze that pierced through the silence. The expression was one of sheer agony, and I felt a knot form in my stomach. "What happened here?" I whispered, half expecting an answer. Instead, the silence thickened, and the wind picked up, whipping around me, carrying an unearthly wailing that sent a shiver down my spine. It was as if the forest itself was mourning the lost souls trapped in these disturbing forms. I could feel the weight of their sorrow, the heaviness imposing on my heart like a boulder threatening to crush me. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath me. I stumbled back just in time to avoid the earth splitting open, revealing a swirling darkness, a gaping maw that seemed to beckon me closer, much like a siren's call. Shadows twisted at its edges, writhing and seething, almost as if they were alive, swirling like smoke in a windless void. Panic surged through my veins. Instinct told me to run, but something icy gripped my heart, holding me in place. From the pit, I could make out faint cries, muffled, desperate voices rising from the void, their words intermingled with my relentless heartbeat. Help us, they beckoned, a sound so haunting it felt like a physical assault on my senses. I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to lean in closer, to succumb to that primal urge to save whoever or whatever lay within. Before I could react, a figure emerged from the dark pit, rising with unnatural grace. It was a woman, draped in tattered robes that seemed to absorb the surrounding darkness, her long hair cascading like shadows down her back. Her face was obscured by a veil, and as she reached out towards me, the whispers grew louder, swirling in a chaotic symphony. "Join us," she murmured, voice a slow, hypnotic melody that slithered into my mind like a tendril of smoke. "We are waiting for you. You belong here." Fear coursed through me, battling with the allure of her words. Part of me longed to step forward, to escape the weight of the world I had left behind, yet I fought to hold on to the flickering light inside me, that part of my spirit that yearned for freedom and hope. Stepping back, I could feel the shadows gnawing at my feet, trying to claim me as their own. "Get back!" I shouted, summoning the strength I had found, pushing against the fear wrapping around me like chains. My voice sliced through the darkness, but her haunting laughter filled the air, echoing off the statue's tormented faces. "You cannot escape what you truly are." The ground rumbled violently again, and the pit threatened to swallow everything. Every shred of light, every semblance of sanity. I stumbled backward, my heart pounding like a war drum, as the shadows twisted, reaching for me with clawed fingers that seemed to emerge from the very soil beneath my feet. In a moment of clarity, I remembered the glowing symbols from the altar. If that light had repelled the shadows before, maybe it could do so again. Spinning around, I rushed toward the nearby statues, desperation fueling my movements as I scanned for anything that might help. My fingers brushed over the rough stone, feeling the chill seeping into my bones. But when I looked closely, I noticed faint markings etched into the surface, symbols similar to those that had glowed before. Realizing my chance, I frantically traced the symbols with my fingers, feeling warmth pulse from them in response. The ground felt alive beneath me, the cries from the pit growing louder as if they sensed my intentions. I whispered a prayer, a plea for strength, focusing on the radiant light that surged from my spirit, willing it to connect with the power hidden in the stone. As I finished tracing the last symbol, the light erupted from my fingertips, igniting the statues around me in a brilliant blaze. The shadows shrieked in agony, recoiling from the blaze as I felt a sense of empowerment rush through me. The woman in the dark pit let out a furious scream, her ethereal form dimming against the brilliance surrounding me. "Fool!" she bellowed, rage reverberating through the air like thunder. "You cannot defeat what is already within you." But I was resolute now, my heart pounding with the courage I had unearthed. I directed the light toward the pit, channeling it with every fiber of my being, illuminating the dark abyss that had threatened to consume me. The swirling shadows began to dissolve, vaporizing like mist under the sun, and the voices turned to wails of despair. Yet even in this moment of victory, I felt the expansive darkness pushing back against me, a lingering presence that was not yet defeated. The struggle felt endless, as if the forest itself was a labyrinth designed to ensnare me. As light filled the clearing, I noticed other figures starting to emerge from the shadows, specters shaped like lost souls, their eyes filled with anguish. "Help us," they cried, their voices a cacophony of sorrow and desperation. I felt a wave of compassion wash over me, but I knew I couldn't save them all, not when I was still fighting to save myself. Yet there was a flicker of understanding deep inside me, a connection between my plight and theirs, a mirror reflecting my fears and regrets all at once. I paused, looking back toward the dark pit, determination reigniting my spirit. "I will find a way to free you. But first, I must be free myself." With a sudden resolve, I pushed forth the light, letting it radiate outward, reaching not only for the forms around me, but also for the gaping maw that threatened to pull me under. "You will not take me," I shouted, voice cracking with the force of my conviction, even as the shadows clawed at my ankles, grasping for a hold. As the brilliance expanded, engulfing everything in its path, I felt the energy from the symbols feeding into my own pulse, intertwining with the flickering flame of my spirit. The clearing transformed into a realm of blinding light, forcing shadows to retreat into the depths, their whispers turning to incoherent moans. And as the darkness faded, I saw something remarkable. The forms of the lost souls began to shimmer, pulling away from the ground as if the light had set them free. Their faces shifted from anguish to relief, eyes lighting up with gratitude. They stepped tentatively toward the light, and I realized that they were not just remnants of despair. They were echoes of hope, reflections of the strength I had fought so hard to reclaim. But just as their outlines solidified, the very ground beneath my feet began to shake. The pit surged with furious energy, shadows clawing up the walls, rising higher, becoming a swirling vortex of chaos again. I could feel my heart race, the panic threatening to drown me. From within the pit, the woman's voice boomed once more, filling the clearing with oppressive force. "Your light cannot illuminate the truth." At that moment, fear collided with defiance, and I gathered my strength one last time, intent on facing the awful truth that lay hidden beneath the pit's surface. I felt the tether to my past lurking in the depths, that darkness that taunted me, waiting for my resolve to falter. I had to confront it if I ever hoped to be free. In that swirling chaos, I prepared myself for the confrontation. I faced the pit, my heart pounding loudly as shadows clawed up from the void, reaching for me again. Determination flooded through me, fending off despair, and I stepped closer, unwilling to turn away any longer. "Bring it on," I declared, my voice steady, and for a fleeting moment, the world fell silent, hanging in suspense as I prepared to embrace whatever horrors awaited me in the darkness below. With my heart racing, I took a deep breath and stepped toward the abyss, prepared for whatever lay within. The swirling darkness below pulsed with raw energy, sending out tendrils of shadow that crept toward me like serpents seeking their prey. I could feel the cold air rising from the chasm, embracing me in its chilling grasp, whispering promises of fear and despair. As I leaned over the edge, the shadows began to coalesce, forming familiar shapes that twisted and distorted. I squinted into the gloom, recognizing faces of the lost souls I had witnessed earlier, their expressions twisted in agony, begging for release. Their eyes, once filled with hope, now mirrored my own fear, reflecting my dread as they reached up toward me, fingers stretching into the void, desperate to escape their prison. "You have to help us," they cried in unison, their voices blending into a haunting melody that echoed in my mind. "Please don't leave us." Each plea struck me like a dagger, heavy with the weight of grief. I hesitated, torn between my desire to save them and the soul-crushing fear of what awaited me in the depths. The entity that emerged from the darkness, poised to claim me, beckoned with a familiarity that made my pulse quicken. "You belong here with us," it hissed, a terrible truth hidden in its tone. I could feel the shadows tightening around my feet, trying to pull me in, anchoring me to the spot. "No!" I shouted, shaking my head fiercely, forcing myself to focus on the light that continued to flicker within. It was just enough to keep the darkness at bay for now. I had to remember the energy pulsing from the symbols, the radiance that banished the gloom, even if just for a moment. Determined, I closed my eyes and extended my hands toward the pit, allowing that flicker of light inside me to grow. The warmth began at my fingertips, spreading like an explosion of hope, feeding off the fear swirling in my mind. I envisioned every ounce of strength. All my courage poured into that brilliant glow, igniting the air around me. As if responding to my will, the light flared brightly, illuminating the cleft in the earth and pushing back against the gnashing shadows. The piercing screams of despair rose and crescendoed, echoing through the trees, a chorus of tormented souls scrambling to find their way back to the light. The ground shook violently beneath me, and I felt a tug, a desperate pulling sensation that threatened to tear me apart. "Let go!" the dark figure screeched, the voice morphing into a frenzied rage that rattled the branches above. "You cannot challenge the darkness within." But I couldn't falter. I shouted, my voice rising above the chaos. "I am not afraid." I focused the radiant energy pulsating through me toward the howling abyss. The darkness hissed and writhed, shrinking away reluctantly, the tortured faces of the souls contorting in pain as they fought against the light. The pit seemed to react, swirling frantically, pulling on the earth like an angry beast, devouring everything in its path. I felt the resonance of my spirit harmonizing with the ancient symbols, a song of defiance merging within me. A sudden realization dawned. This was not just about my past, but theirs too. "Together!" I shouted, my voice resolute. "We can break free!" I reached into the depths, calling upon those trapped souls to unite with me, to channel their fear into the light, to rise together and break the chains binding us all. They began to shimmer, their spectral forms coalescing into a brilliant array, flickering bright. With newfound strength, I pushed harder, releasing the light like a beacon into the depths. Shadows recoiled, darkness thrashing violently against the brilliant force I had summoned. In that moment, the figure within the chasm screeched, anguish spilling from its lips as it clung to the edge, the swirling shadows clawing at it desperately. No, this is not the end. It launched itself toward me, a flurry of tendrils reaching to ensnare me once more, but the brilliance grew brighter, drowning out the darkness, illuminating the very souls I had sworn to save. Light cascaded through the clearing, casting the anguished statues into laughter as they grinned widely, joy flooding their stone faces. The dark figure fell back, disappearing into the swirling void, an agonized howl echoing throughout the trees as the shadows began to retract beneath the radiant glow. In that blinding moment of triumph, I felt the presence of countless souls surge, their energy intertwining with mine, painting the world in vivid bursts of color, the trees around me glowing with life. I realized that this wasn't just a fight against the darkness. It was a collaboration, breathing life into the very essence of what made us human. As the oppressive chaos receded, settling into a tranquil silence, the pit narrowed, folding back in on itself until it vanished altogether, leaving no trace of the horrors it had held. I stood there, breathless, the forest around me transformed, whispers of hope threading through the branches as the shadows melted away. Yet even as relief washed over me, I learned that the darkness would not simply fade. Paula's words echoed in my memory, a reminder of the lingering specters of fear that would always circle back. They were parts of my being. I couldn't ignore what I had faced. There was still work to be done. I took a deep, shaky breath, heart pounding as I began to notice the shift in the atmosphere. The forest felt alive again, and the figures of the lost souls surrounded me, their forms shimmering with gratitude. They stared at me with their shimmering eyes, restoring hope and warmth to the air as I whispered thanks for all they had shared. But then, just as the air began to shift back to its serene state, I saw movement at the edges of the clearing. A dark silhouette flitted between the trees, flickering like candle shadows, drawing my attention. My heart dropped as I squinted into the gloom. The shadows had not gone completely. There was something lingering, crouching low, almost waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. An icy grip of dread washed over me. "Who's there?" I called out, but my voice trembled, barely breaking the quiet that now surrounded me. The silhouette darted closer, revealing piercing eyes glowing in the moonlight. I felt my blood run cold, a sickening sensation creeping into my veins. The presence felt like a family of phantoms reunited, an echo of anguish clawing its way back to me. Shadows began to materialize, moving fluidly as if nourishing each other, and I knew in that moment the fight was far from over. No, I whispered, dread coiling tightly in my stomach. The darkness had returned, reformed, and ready to reclaim what it lost. With every instinct screaming, I took a step back, hands fumbling to summon the radiant light again. The glow pulsed weakly, fighting against the chill that encroached with every breath I took. The shapes around me began to congeal, faces forming in the shadows, and I felt their despair, their longing for resolution. "Help us," they chorused, the echoing voices blending together in a haunting melody, wrapping around me like a shroud. I gasped, both shaken and determined. In that fleeting moment, I understood that facing this darkness was my only option. There would be no escape, only the choice to confront whatever horrors awaited me. "I will face you," I declared, battling the chill creeping into my bones, drawing every ounce of courage I had left. "I will not be taken." And so, with my heart pounding in my chest, I prepared for the darkness to strike again, gripping tight to the light that flickered, ready to fight back against the chaos one last time. I focused on the flickering light within me, steeling myself for the confrontation ahead. The shadows twisted and darted like predators stalking their prey, the shapes continuously morphing, faces blending into grotesque visages of despair. My skin prickled as they hissed and murmured, their words seeping into my mind. Promises of surrender, whispers of hopelessness. Each syllable felt like a cold breath across my neck, a reminder that I was not alone in this dark heart of the forest. The air thickened with tension as I clenched my fists, summoning every bit of resolve I had left. "Show yourselves," I called, my voice echoing through the clearing, though uncertainty laced my tone. The shadows paused momentarily, coiling like a serpent uncertain of the strike. A sickening silence enveloped the grounds, a heaviness pressing down upon me. And then, as if heeding my command, an elongated figure emerged from the darkness. It slinked forward with a fluid, uncanny grace, its body a swirling tapestry of shadow and sorrow. Muffled cries echoed from its depths, a cacophony of grief resonating through the air, trickling into my ears like liquid fear. I could see sharp teeth glinting in the dim light, a wide smile that didn't reach its terror-filled eyes. "You think you can withstand the dark?" It jeered, the voice a chilling melody that felt like ice crawling up my spine. I shuddered but stood my ground. I would not back down now. Couldn't let this thing take control. Feeling the warmth inside me begin to wane under the intensity of its gaze, I pushed against that despair, visualizing it transforming into light. "I will fight," I declared, allowing my inner glow to flicker and dance. The creature recoiled, surprised, shadows flickering around it like flames, but it quickly regained its composure. I could taste the bitterness of fear, the lingering echo of its presence suffocating me, wanting to ensnare my very essence. Each heartbeat seemed to pulse louder in my ears as the figure inched closer, closing the distance between us. I could see more clearly now, the countless suffering souls trapped within its body, swirling eyes locking onto me, desperate for salvation. I took a small step back, the weight of their shared despair overwhelming. "There must be something I can do," I whispered, searching for an answer amidst the growing chaos. Suddenly, the sight of the forest shifted all around me. The trees began to bend and twist, their bark darkening and warping into agonized expressions. Branches clawed at the sky as if grappling with invisible forces. The air grew colder, and shadows crawled along the forest floor like a herd of nightmarish creatures, claiming the ground inch by inch. "You cannot escape this fate," the creature promised, its voice oozing with sadistic glee. With an instinctive action, I raised my arms, channeling the light into a protective sphere around me. "I refuse," I shouted, pouring every ounce of willpower into that tiny flame, willing it to grow stronger. The response was electric, and the light pulsed against the darkness, sending ripples through the shadowy tendrils encroaching upon me. A shrill scream erupted from the figure as the light sliced through the shadows like a knife. "No," it howled, the echoes ricocheting through the forest, reverberating against the already distorted trees. But I didn't wait for its next move. I pressed my attack, pushing forward into the dark, the warmth of hope rising within me, swirling around like a cyclone, a hurricane of brilliance ready to blast through the encroaching dread. The shadows recoiled momentarily, but they quickly surged back, vast waves crashing against my barrier. They whispered my name, each syllable a taunt, an echo of past traumas, the things I had buried deep inside myself. "You cannot defeat who you are," they echoed, voices layering like ghostly hands gripping my heart, tightening around my chest, making it hard to breathe. Doubt slithered into my mind, threatening to undermine my resolve. But in that moment, I closed my eyes, blocking out their taunts, focusing on the bond one had forged with the spirits of the lost. Their faces shimmered at the edge of my memory, their hope blending with mine. "I will set us all free," I vowed, and I felt the pulse of their energy within me, a collective breath of power building, igniting once more. As I opened my eyes and faced the towering figure again, I felt the light swell within, rippling outward like waves against the shore, fierce and unyielding. "Together we rise," I cried, the combined force of hope erupting from within me, illuminating the forest around me in a breathtaking blaze. The darkness wailed, its form contorting as the radiance broke through its structure, exposing the tormented souls writhing within. I could see their despair morph into visible sparks of light, energizing the void as we all surged together, drowning the darkness with our collective light. My heart soared, knowing there was strength in unity. This was not solely my fight. Yet, amid the swirling chaos, the hollow laughter of the figure echoed. You may burn bright, but shadows linger where light cannot tread. I felt a shiver of uncertainty run down my spine, chills igniting dread amidst the brilliance. The shadows began to twist and distort again, unharmed by our united front, beckoning forth more of their tainted kin hidden in the forest depths. Suddenly, the ground rumbled violently, and I was thrown off balance. I stumbled as fissures opened up, dark tendrils emerging from below, grasping at my ankles, pulling me down into the ever-deepening chasm that was forming. I kicked desperately, the earth cracking beneath me, but the shadows only tightened their grip, dragging me closer to the brink of despair. I called out for the souls trapped within the darkness, urging them to rise together with me, each voice paired with mine, forming an echoed rally of defiance. Remember, I shouted, desperate to reclaim our strength. Remember the light we have within. The tug of fear was immense, but as the ethereal glow around me brightened, so did the warmth of the spirits surrounding me, battling against the shadows grasping at my body. The earth trembled again, and I heard a voice whispering through the chaos, distant yet familiar. Let it go, just let go. For a heart-stopping moment, I wavered. The simplicity of surrender folded into my mind. Shouldn't I give in? Maybe it would be easier to succumb to this darkness. But just as despair started to claw at my heart, I felt a surge of warmth pulse through me, the determination igniting the very core of my being, tearing away the doubt clouding my mind. No! I gasped, pulling back from the edge, gathering the light essence that fueled our hope. I focused it like a beacon, casting it forth as a resounding declaration of war against fear itself. I will not give in to you. With that declaration, the light exploded from my outstretched hands, a fierce blaze of energy that shot through the clearing, illuminating the shadows and causing the tendrils to retract, howling in agony. The figures of lost souls coalesced around me, melding with the radiance, adding strength and a collective determination that surged ever higher. As the torrent of light surged forth, I could hear the cries of the dark creature morph into shrieks of panic. You cannot hold me back, it shrieked, shadowy fingers clawing at the light. But the glow was relentless, pouring outward in a beautiful wave, drowning the shadows that had once tried to consume me. The darkness began to unravel, the figure disassembling piece by piece, revealing the pitiful silhouettes of tormented faces that had clung to it. It screeched in fury as I pressed forth, refusing to stop until nothing remained of its malignant form. You will never take away my light, I roared, pounding my fists toward the ground as the shadows twisted and faded away, lost to the brilliance engulfing them. But in that moment of triumph, I could feel something sinister lurking beneath the surface. Another hidden layer of darkness hunched at the edge of my vision, as whispers I could barely grasp murmured through the air. A terror seeped around my heart, cold and heavy. The forest was not finished with me, and this fight was far from over. A heavy presence lingered, hovering just outside the limits of my awareness, far too aware of my every move. I could sense it watching, waiting for the chance to strike again. As the echoes of victory faded, I realized that this forest was a labyrinth, deep-rooted with secrets darker than I had ever imagined. But I stood my ground, heart pounding fiercely within my chest, ready to face whatever lurked in the shadows. This was not the end. I was filled with resurgence. I had the strength of countless souls behind me, and I had found my own, however flickering. All right, I whispered to the darkness that clung to the edges of my vision. I'm ready for you. As the words left my lips, the air around me thickened, stifling my breath. It felt as if the forest held its breath, the trees casting long, angular shadows that twisted and curled like skeletal fingers reaching for me. I could sense something shift in the atmosphere, A tangible weight pressed down on my shoulders like a heavy shroud. The piercing silence was interrupted by the rustle of leaves, a soft whispering that sent chills dancing down my spine. It felt more like a warning than a gentle caress of the wind. I turned slowly, scanning the darkness that surrounded me, dread pooling in the pit of my stomach. The trees became grotesque silhouettes, their branches grabbing at the air like hands grasping for my soul. Suddenly, a figure flickered between the trunks, a movement so quick it was almost imperceptible. My heart raced, pumping adrenaline through my veins. "Who's there?" I called out, the quiver in my voice betraying my fear. The darkness seemed to echo back at me, taunting as laughter bounced between the towering pines, sending the icy fingers of dread clawing up my neck. "Do you think you can stand against the shadows?" A voice whispered from somewhere deep within the gloom. It was a voice both haunting and familiar, laced with malice, yet teasingly soft, a siren song for the lost. I gritted my teeth, focused on the light still pulsing within. "I won't back down," I shouted, my determination slicing through the echoes of my uncertainty. The shadows flickered, hesitating for just a moment before a deeper darkness responded, flowing forward like smoke, engulfing everything in its path. The ground felt alive beneath my feet, shifting and crumbling as the dark entity slithered closer. I stumbled back, tripping over exposed roots that seemed to be clawing at me, as if rejecting my presence. I felt the cold breath of the darkness at my heels, a reminder that it wouldn't let me escape easily. Through the creeping despair, I remembered the souls gathered around me, urging me on. Together, I thought fiercely, summoning their energy. The light within me flared again, pushed to its limits against the encroaching darkness. It felt like a fire igniting in the depths of my spirit, a sensation of warmth crawling upwards, battling against the cold hands trying to drag me down. The shadows began to coalesce into shapes, writhing forms that took on semi-solid appearances, twisting into faces filled with anguish and rage. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of resentment that filled the air, pressing against my ears. "Join us. Be one with the darkness," they chanted, echoing through the trees like a savage lullaby. "Embrace the fear. Let it take you." I shook my head, trying to block out their toxic siren song. "No!" I shouted defiantly, the light intensifying to a blinding halo around me. "I choose to fight." But as I clung to my determination, flashes of memories invaded my mind, faces of the lost and forgotten souls spinning around me. I could see their eyes. Their pleading expressions became distorted horrors that weighed heavily on my heart. Shaking, I stumbled back, the light flickering ominously, and it became clear that even my resolve had its limits. I closed my eyes, feeling the warmth within start to dim, fear gnawing at my core. I felt utterly surrounded, and the darkness pressed in tighter than ever, swallowing every ounce of brightness I had ignited. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself standing before a vast, swirling void that seemed to pulse, drawing on every shred of hope left in the world. I could feel its pull, the powerful darkness whispering secrets, promising peace and surrender, and I was torn between the urge to resist and the aching exhaustion that threatened to engulf me in despair. Suddenly, the figures of the lost surged forward, their hands outstretched as they implored me to join them in the darkness. Their faces were a blend of fear and longing, pleading with me with desperate eyes that carried the weight of regrets. "You are not alone," they mouthed, and more than fear, I felt a tug of compassion wash over me, drowning my resistance with their shared pain. But in that moment, terror crystallized around me, a realization that this dark realm would consume anyone willing to join, suffocating the light with shadows of relentless despair. It felt like a trap that was so enticing, but deep down, I knew it was a lure to submit to the weight of hopelessness. "No!" I screamed, forcing myself to confront the abyss. "You don't own me!" The void trembled in response, the shadows whirling and distorting in rage. An icy wind whipped around me, pulling at my clothes, scratching at my skin like 1,000 tiny claws. Panic surged in my veins, but I couldn't allow fear to take root. I had to counterattack. I summoned every memory of joy, every flicker of love I carried in my heart, and let it radiate from me like a tidal wave. Light crashed against the darkness, and I pushed forward, charging through the haze of despair. The swirling blackness screamed, a wailing sound erupting like a banshee's call, the faces of the tormented souls behind it shifting from anger to confusion, and then to fleeting hope. I could feel the pull of the dark beneath my feet. It clawed and clung like a shadowy specter, but I grinned at the fear, letting it choke the shadows that sought to bind me. Each flicker of warmth grew with intensity, merging with that collective sorrow and transforming it into determination. "We will not fade," I shouted, a roar mingling with the howling wind, directly challenging the chaos that threatened to swallow me whole. As the light erupted in all directions, illuminating the forest in phosphorescent brilliance, the ground beneath rumbled more violently. I felt the roots beneath me react, wrenching free from the earth, surrounding me like frantic tendrils grasping for salvation. The forest felt alive with the energy of the souls as they began to rise, swirling around me, each one a radiant thread interweaving with my own. Then I turned back to face the beast, the dark figure writhing and crying as it fought against the onslaught of our combined brightness. I pressed onward, the glow surrounding me echoing the strength of all those who remained trapped, all the souls yearning for freedom. The void trembled and flickered, an ominous sign of its weakening hold, but I was not yet finished. "I will break this cycle," I roared, drawing even deeper from the well of our collective energy. In the fading light, the shadows twisted again, their grasp growing desperate, grasping at my ankles, tearing at the memories swirling around me. I could hear the whispers turning into grotesque growls, and the darkness reshaped itself into towering figures with ghastly faces, vitriol dripping from their jagged forms. But I stood firm. "Together, we are stronger." The words sang from my lips as I extended my hands, summoning their spirits to join the luminous force erupting from within me. Each soul intertwined with the glow surrounding us, radiant energy pulsing with renewed fervor, tearing through the sinister remnant of despair that sought to claim us all. The cacophony of despair roared louder, but it blended with shouts of defiance, hope forming a barrier against the dark. I stood, surrounded by souls, feeling the weight of their resolve and pain merge with my own, ready to surge forth into battle. "Let the light consume it," I cried, every fiber in my being urging the brilliance to break free, to envelop the pressing darkness before me. In that moment, I realized we were not just fighting against darkness. We were reclaiming the light, the essence of life and hope that lived within all of us, calling it back to the surface. I could almost hear their whispers transforming into a symphony of resilience as the figures of despair howled and twisted. And as I gestured forward, the ground erupted with raw energy, the pulse of life crashing through the forest as radiant light surged. The bleak pull of loneliness and despair began to unravel, flickering like embers caught in an inferno, fracturing the darkness that had chained us for so long. I could feel it, feel the darkness breaking, shattering into fragments that fell like ash all around me. Faces transformed, shimmering with newfound strength as they reached out, grasping for freedom. But just as victory felt within grasp, a chill raced through me. I glanced over my shoulder, the oppressive weight of something cold and vile creeping back into the air. It hovered just beyond the edges of the light, a creeping sensation that wrapped around my throat, silencing my breath. A voice slithered into my mind, more horrific than before, a whisper entrenched in malice. "You think you can win? You will always belong to me." The shadows rearranged themselves, thickening as they surged forth, a new surge of darkness rising to reclaim what it had lost. I felt the panic rising again, sweat pooling at the base of my spine. Each flicker of hope was seized by the shadows, turning the pulse of revitalization into a desperate battle for survival. My heart raced as nihilistic laughter echoed, seemingly coming from everywhere at once. I stood my ground, the memories of those who had suffered rallying within me, pushing me to remain steadfast. No! I roared again, hands still extended, even as the shadows threatened to swallow me whole. In that perilous moment, something snapped within me, igniting a ferocious blaze of will. I refused to let the darkness win. Not now. Not after fighting so hard. Fight with me, I bellowed, projecting my voice through the chaos, summoning every ounce of light and courage in my heart. Time seemed to stretch as I felt the pulse of energy rise again, weaving brightly around my body like an aura, pulling closer the essence of every soul that had connected with me. They rallied, the remaining hope igniting into an explosion of flame, unwavering and fierce. And as it surged forth, I knew this wasn't just my fight anymore. As the energy flared, the darkness absorbed the light, swirling and crackling with rage. A deep growl reverberated through the air, the shadows thrumming like a monstrous heartbeat, pulsating in response to the power I had ignited. I felt the forest shift around me, branches creaking ominously, shadows stretching longer, reaching out like twisted hands eager to clutch me in their icy grasp. In the distance, something moved, a silhouette darker than the night, writhing with a rhythm that sent shivers coursing through my body. It detached itself from the depths of the forest, rising grotesquely above the trees, skimming just above the ground like a dark fog. I could barely see its form, but I could feel its hunger, a visceral draw toward my very essence. A gut-wrenching cacophony echoed through the space, like the wails of the forgotten caught in a loop of torment. The chilling cries wrapped around me, making my heart race as I forced myself to confront the looming horror. The shadows surrounding me began to throb, folding and shifting, their hollow eyes watching intently, like a crowd waiting for a performer to falter. The whispers invaded my mind, splintering through my thoughts like jagged shards of glass, each one a grim reminder of the despair I sought to fight. "You'll never escape," they hissed, echoing with a haunting familiarity that made me shudder inside. The forest floor trembled, a horrible quake beneath my feet, as the mass of darkness surged forward. It enveloped me, closing in, claws and tendrils grasping wildly at my light. I could feel their touch, ice-cold and clammy, slithering over my skin, making every nerve scream in protest. I pulled my arms tight against my body, trying to ward off their chilling embrace, but it was as if the shadows understood my fear and fed off of it, growing stronger as if fueled by my very panic. "Fight it!" I roared, pushing against the weight threatening to suffocate me. My pulse surged with a primal energy, and I felt the souls of the lost gathering around me, like shields of resilience, urging me to stand my ground. Their whispers melded with my defiance, an anthem swelling in my chest, growing louder than the desolation swirling around us. And then, an image flashed before my eyes, one of the lost souls, face twisted with torment, reaching out as I once did to help them stand against the darkness. It struck my heart with a flicker of purpose, igniting my resolve anew. "No more," I breathed, willing the memories to coalesce into a formidable force. The light burst from me in a blinding wave, incandescent and fierce. The shadowy figures shrieked, their cries rising to a fever pitch, the sound battering against my ears like a storm. I could feel the tendrils recoil, thrashing wildly as I took another step forward, feeling newfound strength building with each heartbeat. I had become a conduit for the defiance of the lost, their fears flowing in as power, intertwining with mine. But just when I thought I was gaining an upper hand, a heart-stopping chill swept through the air. From the depths of the shadows, a figure emerged, towering and ghastly. It was monstrous, a grotesque amalgamation of every nightmare I had ever faced, the very embodiment of fear itself. Its face was hidden in swirling darkness, but I could feel its gaze locked onto me, penetrating to the depths of my soul, exploring every crack and crevice of my being. "Foolish child," it whispered, the voice smooth like silk but laced with venom. "You think you can escape your own darkness? I am the shadow in your heart, the echo of every fear you've ever buried. You belong to me." The air thickened, suffocating as it plucked at my insecurities, each word striking like a dagger. I staggered back, heart racing, unable to shake the sense of control it wove around me. I wasn't a warrior. I was just a fragile human against an embodiment of terror. The shadows roared, growing unsettled as I faltered, forcing me to confront shattered reflections of myself. The insecurities, the doubts that had followed me for all this time. Instinctively, I closed my eyes, trying to drown out the malevolent whispers illustrating the worst parts of myself, while the tendrils crept closer, their grasp tightening like a vice. "No," I chanted softly, desperation flaring in my chest. "I am not afraid of you." And then something clicked inside me, awakening a spark of rebellion. I remembered my journey. Each challenge had been a thread reinforcing my spirit, entwining every moment of pain into a tapestry of strength. The illumination around me began to flicker again, and the faces of those lost surged in my mind, reminding me of the bond we had forged. "Together, we are whole," I yelled, voice unwavering, echoing through the dark, and I felt that warm light burst forth again, shaking off the chilling embrace of despair. Yet, even as the light surged, I could sense something heavier lurking beneath, a foreboding presence coiling around my heart like a serpent, watching and waiting. The realization struck like lightning. The shadows might have been temporarily repelled, but they were not gone, merely regrouping, plotting their strike from the edge of my consciousness. The depth of the forest seemed to grow darker, more twisted with each passing moment, shadows morphing into grotesque contortions, echoing my inner turmoil. My mind raced to formulate a plan, but before I could think further, a horrible, shrill laugh erupted, piercing the silence like a hunting horn piercing the mist. The ground beneath me began to quake violently, pitch-black fissures erupting all around. My heart thudded in terror as the darkness seeped through the cracks, flaring and swirling around me like hungry flames. I could feel the familiar sense of impending doom and dread rise to the surface, the same feeling that had haunted me throughout my life, gnawing at my soul. "Join us, dear," a multitude of voices whispered, echoing closer, closer still. The shadows twisted into tortured faces, remnants of those lost before me, mingling in grotesque unison. They beckoned me, their hollow eyes imploring, but filled with an unsettling hunger. With a sudden, frantic motion, I lunged forward, away from their grasping hands, but the darkness shifted impossibly fast, creating a wall that lunged to block my escape. I stumbled as icy fingers grasped at my ankles, pulling me down. Panic flooded my mind as I flailed, my breath hitching in my throat, each breath a suffocating reminder of their presence. "Embrace your darkness," they cooed, and I felt despair tugging at the corners of my resolve, gnawing at the little light I had left. I closed my eyes tight, fighting back tears as I recalled the faces of those who had once guided me, the moments that reminded me of my purpose. "I refuse," I mumbled through clenched teeth, gathering my strength. "You don't own me. You only give me power." The surge of energy returned, writhing within me, a bright, warm flame against the chilling darkness. I felt it strengthen, intermingling with the essence of the lost souls around me, transforming despair into vibrant energy, an unyielding force that danced through the night. I could feel the shadows recoiling again, the shrieks of anguish intertwining with Regia as they struggled to resist the brilliance rising to consume them. The figures twisted, fracturing against the brilliance until they swirled into obscurity, fear tumbling away from me like ashes in the wind. But even then, I knew this battle was only a beginning. The darkness wouldn't end with a single burst of light. How could it? I had only uncovered a layer of the terror embedded in this unnatural forest. They would come again, looking for weakness, and I had to be ready. Panic surged in my veins as realization set in. I was entrenched in a war I hadn't fully understood, and the shadows were clinging to me, stalking from just beyond the edges of my consciousness, ready to strike when I was weakest. And in that terrifying moment, I could feel the tremble of truth worming its way into my mind, a cold, claustrophobic certainty that deep down, this maze of darkness had more hidden horrors, far worse than what I had faced so far. I felt the urge to flee, to escape, but they were everywhere, pressing against me from all sides as the remnants of shadows lingered like a dark mist. Placing a hand against my heart, I tried to quell the panic. Stay focused, I whispered to myself. Stay strong. I would not be their prey. Not now, not ever. With newfound determination, I raised my head, scanning the oppressive darkness. I had to find a way to uncover the secrets buried deep within this shadowy realm. I had to confront every fragment of terror lurking in the forgotten corners of my soul. As I stood my ground, a low growl erupted from somewhere ahead, a sound more primal than before. It resonated through the forest, sending echoes ricocheting off the barren trees. My pulse quickened. My instincts screamed at me to run. Yet I knew that fleeing would mean succumbing, and I wasn't willing to surrender. Bring it on, I murmured, steeling myself for whatever lay ahead. Bring it on. Just as the growl faded, the shadows around me shifted again, intertwining into a shape that began to solidify. My heart pounded furiously as I braced for what was coming. The air turned cooler, and an unsettling silence blanketed the forest, broken only by the faint rustle of leaves underfoot. Suddenly, the figure lunged from the darkness, crashing into the open space before me. It was hideous, tall and sinewy, with limbs that twisted unnaturally, appearing almost like they were formed from shadows themselves. Its face was a grotesque mask of despair, eyes wide and sunken, the skin hanging loosely as if there was nothing inside. "Why do you resist?" it rasped, voice grating like stones against glass, claws sharp enough to slice through the air. "You will only bring more suffering. Embrace the darkness, and your pain will vanish." I could feel my determination wavering at the sight of its terrifying form. This thing was the embodiment of every horror I had faced, manifesting my deepest fears into reality. But I took a deep breath, forcing my feet to stay firmly planted. "No," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "I will not become like you." The creature seemed to draw its energy from my defiance, oozing a thick, black mist that curled around me, wrapping tighter and tighter with each moment. I could feel my breath quickening. The weight of despair threatened to pull me under, suffocating hope. "You are nothing," it hissed, laughter underlining its words, echoing through the trees with a chilling resonance. Behind its laughter, I could hear the distant wailing of lost souls, trapped in a never-ending cycle of torment. It was both haunting and beautiful, a twisted symphony that sent ice down my spine. Suddenly, the ground beneath my feet trembled again, sending me off balance. I stumbled back, nearly falling, but I caught myself just in time. I could feel the forest shifting, a longing heartbeat resonating deep in the soil, as if the very earth was alive and writhing at my feet. "What are you?" I shouted, the words fueled by a fierce urgency. "What do you want from me?" The creature stepped closer, forming and reforming like a spectral mist, stretching itself in distorted shapes. "You already know," it replied, voice dripping with venom and something that felt like familiarity. Its form contorted, clawed hands beckoning me forward, as if desperate for connection. "You carry the weight of despair inside you. You bring it to me. You give it life." A surge of fear crashed through me. The truth in its words made reality tremble. The shadows flickered. Memories I'd long buried fluttered within reach. Feeling vulnerable, I fought against the tide of emotions that threatened to drown me. I wouldn't let this creature have the satisfaction of feasting on my pain. "No," I yelled, summoning every ounce of inner strength. I refused to be a vessel for despair. As I shouted, the light within me flared brighter, illuminating the surrounding darkness. The creature recoiled as if struck, its form breaking apart momentarily, fragments spiraling like ashes in the wind. Yet, they quickly began to regroup, slinking back to form into its insidious shape again. From the depths of that void, whispers began to rise again, deeper and angrier this time, clawing at the back of my mind, feeding on my fears. I could hear them echoing, mingling with the rustled leaves and the distant cries of souls. It sent shivers racing down my spine, as it reminded me of all the times I had felt alone. Look around you, it growled, gesturing toward the trees, shadows writhing as if alive. You think you're not part of this? Look at what you've become. You can't escape your own darkness. The weight of its words clung to me like sticky mud, but I fought through the pitch-black cloud closing in on my thoughts. I remembered the flickers of joy I had felt, the love that once colored my world, and I clung to those fragments like lifelines. Your time is up, I shouted defiantly, pushing forward, sending waves of bright energy crashing against the encroaching darkness. The shadows recoiled, shrieking as I unleashed a torrent of light, intense enough to split the air around me, creating shimmering barriers against the looming darkness. Yet the creature only laughed again, a sound that echoed in my bones, more twisted this time, like nails scraping against metal. You think this can stop me? You're simply delaying the inevitable. It surged toward me, the distance collapsing in an instant, a blur of shadow and chaos. I felt a cold mist wrap around me, squeezing tightly, suffocating the very light I had conjured. It scraped against my ribs like knives, reminding me that fear and pain were hidden just beneath the surface, waiting for weakness to breach through. With each heartbeat, its presence grew stronger, and I could feel my strength waning under its relentless assault. The clarity of my resolve began to fray, and memories of past failures surfaced unbidden, clawing at my mind, threatening to drag me down to join the wailing spirits haunting the depths of the shadows. But just as I sensed myself slipping, a surge of warmth ignited deep within me, spiraling from the very core of who I was. It shot through me like fire, fueling each flickering thought and igniting the embers of forgotten strength. No, I whispered fiercely, my voice rising above the darkness. You have no power over me anymore. The creature paused, momentarily taken aback, and I seized the moment. Channeling every ounce of light, joy, and strength I had within me, I unleashed it all in one explosive burst. Blinding luminescence erupted, weaving and coiling around the darkness like a serpent. The shrieks of the shadow creature morphed into cries of agony, a cacophony suffused with rage and desperation. Spectral forms scattered, disintegrating into particles of smoke, while the shadows began collapsing in on themselves, the edges fraying and unraveling. I felt the overwhelming force of my spirit fight against the shadows, dissolving their malice and turning it into a mist that hung heavy in the air. Darkness itself began to peel away, allowing slivers of dawn to creep in, illuminating the forest with soft hues of hope. "Stay away!" I yelled, thrusting my hand forward. But the creature, its face contorted in fury, lunged again, gathering the remaining darkness like a storm. The air thickened, swirling ominously as shadows began to coil around it, rejuvenating its form like a cyclone of torment. Gritting my teeth, I felt my own light dim beneath that immense weight, vanishing beneath the waves of despair crashing down upon me once more. A terrible realization washed over me. The battle wasn't won. It was a mere pause before the inevitable storm, and this creature was still lurking, waiting to seize upon any flicker of doubt. The wailing grew louder, echoes enveloping me, vibrating through the trees and resounding against the very core of my being. I ducked low as wind howled, whipping around and sending branches crashing against one another in a terrifying symphony of chaos. "Join us." The voices drifted through the din, melding into a synchronized chant filled with sinister allure. We know your pain. We know your fears. Let us lift the burden. No! I shouted again, refusing to succumb to its invitation. I felt their allure threatening to pull me under, luring me with promises of relief from suffering, a deceptive sweetness that tasted of ash on my tongue. Buried in the whispers were the desperate cries of souls grasping for escape, only to be twisted and reclaimed by the abyss once more. As I locked eyes with the creature, a sudden flicker of understanding passed between us. It reveled in the chaos, hungry for my surrender, feeding off the distorting shadows that curled around me like vipers. You cannot deny the truth. You have already lost, it growled, advancing with renewed vigor, darker than before. I could feel it attempting to ensnare my mind, slandering my worth, curious fingers reaching deep into the recesses where I had hidden my deepest regrets. And that's when I realized this was not just a fight for my survival. It was a battle for my very identity. Summoning everything I had left, I squared my shoulders, fighting against the shadows that sought to bind me. This creature wanted me to crumble beneath its pressure. It wanted to devour my essence. But if I could hold on, if I could withstand its onslaught, if I could remember who I truly was, I could break free. Raising my arms high, I banished the darkness like a shield, illuminating everything around me. Bright light exploded in every direction, arcing like lightning and pushing the dark tendrils back with astonishing speed. The shrieks mingled with furious howls as the shadow recoiled, shriveling and vanishing into the darkness. But even with this momentary victory, I knew the battle was far from over. Even though my light was fierce, the shadows stirred like angry waves, undeterred by my desperate attempt to drive them away. They slithered back from the edges of visibility, pooling at my feet, whispering dark promises that twisted my guts into knots. Fear controls you, the shadow creature sneered, its voice a creeping echo that wormed into my consciousness. You can't hide from what already lies within. It stretched out its fingers, monstrous claws glistening with an otherworldly sheen, reaching toward me as I stumbled back instinctively. My pulse raced. Every instinct screamed at me to run as that dark presence grew thicker, surrounding me with an impending sense of doom. The air became stifling, heavy with an overwhelming dread that felt like a physical weight pressing down on my chest. I was trapped, and the forest around me mirrored the storm churning in my mind, trees twisting unnaturally in the fading light. Let go, it hissed, the shadows swirling like smoke, trying to enter my thoughts. You don't have to fight anymore. Embrace the darkness. It is your true nature. I could feel myself wavering, heart quickening as echoes of doubt whispered cruelly in the back of my mind, tempting me into surrender. Memories flashed vividly. The countless times I had fallen short, the moments my heart had been shattered by life's cruel hands. Doubts pooled like quicksand, ready to pull me down into despair, offering me a dark sanctuary where pain no longer mattered. But then I remembered the flicker of warmth, the love, the friendships, the victories against all odds. I glanced at the shadows encircling my ankles, creeping higher, sending chills racing up my spine, shadows aching to redefine who I was in their grotesque image. Stay back, I shouted defiantly, forcing the light within me to rise again, fighting against the suffocating despair. You will not define me. The creature recoiled, shriek echoing as it enveloped itself in darkness, a plume of vapor rising in a tempest of fury. Yet, even as I stood strong, rage and despair began to function cruelly in tandem, battering my mind like a storm. Images morphed. Dark creatures from my past materialized amongst the writhing shadows, whispering twisted regrets and doubts that gnawed at my confidence. Remember this pain? They laughed, voices blending into an eerie cacophony. It will never leave. You'll always be alone. I fought against the tide of memories flooding back, grappling with every word they hurled at me like arrows. The more I resisted, the stronger their laughter grew, jittering with malice, swirling around me, instilling panic in my soul. Their victorious chorus echoed through the twilight, but I gritted my teeth, determined to rise above their poison. "Silence!" I shouted, and with a desperate breath, pulled all my energy together. Light burst forth from deep within, bright and hot, pushing back the shadows for a heartbeat. They shuddered, fragmenting, but then coalesced again, more determined than before, each dark tendril elongating like fingers seeking to choke the very light that had just illuminated my path. "Your spirit is frail," the shadow creature mocked, materializing in the chaos, a dark storm swirling at its core. It took a step closer, looming, yet something about its presence felt different this time. The air trembled, a palpable fear vibrating between us as the shadows clawed toward me, eager to pull me into their fold. The forest hummed with life, an ominous throbbing that matched the growing tension. I noticed the trees seemed to lean closer, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal arms to snatch me away. For a moment, an illusion flickered in my mind, a glimpse of a world shrouded in darkness, where I would be forever bound to this shadow creature, lost among a sea of despair. "Join me," it whispered, voice draped in velvet but edged with iron. Together, we would be unstoppable, an essence of pure power, free from the shackles of your painful past. Staring into its swirling, void-like eyes, I felt an eerie pull that grew more insistent. Tendrils of shadow wrapped slickly around my arms, lingering at the edges of my light, taunting me. My resolve faltered for a heartbeat, suffocated by the temptation to finally relinquish my burdens. But just as I was about to tip over the edge, the soft sound of laughter, familiar, warm, echoed through the chaos. It pulled me back, grounded me to my purpose, evoking faces and memories of those precious moments. I envisioned my friends, their unwavering support pushing back the creeping fog of fear. "I choose light," I roared defiantly, harnessing their warmth as my shield against the burgeoning darkness. As I spoke, my light flickered again, igniting with raw, undiluted energy, pushing against the heavy shadows like sunlight penetrating the dense forest. The creature shrieked, a splitting sound that rattled through the trees, but it was too late. The burst of my spirit charged forward, bright and unyielding, shattering the shadows like glass and sending them spiraling into the void. But even as I felt triumphant, a gnawing dread lingered. The shadows dissolved only to melt back together into a vast, swirling mass, more powerful and furious than before, an angry tempest of dark energy. I stumbled backward, gasping for air as the world warped around me. Reality felt like a fragile thread, unraveling before my eyes, a dizzying maelstrom that threatened to consume everything I was. "What are you?" I demanded, stepping back, trying to keep the terror at bay. "What do you want from me?" "Your fear," it bellowed, its voice turning guttural, sending ripples of unease coursing through me. "You will feed me until there is nothing left. This is merely the beginning." The shadows surged, wrapping around me, pulling tighter as I struggled, my skin prickling with the cold of despair. The world spun, and I could feel the darkness slithering beneath my skin, searching for cracks in my resolve. I was losing ground. "Fight!" A quiet but potent voice whispered within, echoing the cries of countless others who had battled their shadows before me. "You have power. Don't let the darkness win." The remembering of their fight fueled mine, a surge of determination rising within me. With one final push, I gathered every shard of strength and light, releasing it with a cry that echoed into the abyss. "You will not take me." The dark mass pulsated furiously, tendrils flailing like trapped serpents, as my light surged forward, blinding and overwhelming. I saw the shadows disintegrate momentarily, flickering like dying embers, revealing fleeting glimpses of lost souls trapped within. Their hollow eyes begged for release, and it struck me a rush of clarity. This was not just about my fight. It was about all those who had been consumed by the darkness. I couldn't only fight for me. I had to fight for them. I surged the energy outward, sending waves of light crashing through the shadows, illuminating the haunting figures with each pulse. "You're not alone," I shouted, feeling the warmth rise. "We will break free together." Each word wove through the remnants of despair, gathering strength, surrounding the lost souls with hope. The air shimmered, and the dark mass twisted in pain, clawing desperately, trying to reclaim its hold. But this time, I was no longer alone. The energy coursed around me, expanding, illuminating the dark forest in a brilliant glow. I felt the lost souls joining me, their warmth wrapping around my heart like a shield, amplifying my power. Each flicker of light connected us, forming a tapestry of hope that intertwined with the shadows, illuminating the path ahead. But something deeper stirred beneath the surface, a pulse of darkness that resonated with ancient malice. I could feel the creature, enraged, drawing back, gathering its strength for a final assault. It twisted violently, shadows flaring and whipping around, sending splashes of darkness flickering against the trees. "You think you can save them?" It screamed, its voice now a terrible mixture of desperation and fury. "They are mine. Their fears bind them to me, and you will not break that bond. You are a fool." As if to prove its point, I watched in horror as the shadows began to pulse, undulating in rhythmic waves, thrumming a dark melody that reverberated through the air like a funeral dirge. The once warm light cocked its head, then turned cold, chilling the blood in my veins. The ground beneath me trembled, cracked, and split, vines creeping up like sinister fingers trying to claw their way up my legs. I fought against the pulse, pulling the light closer to me, rallying it in defense against the encroaching darkness. The shrieks of the long-lost souls hollowed through the air, an unholy symphony echoing my growing dread. "Leave them alone!" I bellowed, rage igniting inside me. The thought of the shadows reclaiming the souls I had just fought for struck me like a knife. I felt each heartbeat resonate with fear as the shadows curled tighter around my feet. Suddenly, the twisted roots began to close in, wrapping around me with a power that felt almost sentient. They pulled me down, closer to the ground, as if hoping to bury me alive under the weight of despair. Panic rose in my throat. I had to break free. I couldn't let them take me or the souls I fought for. The shadow creature laughed, that terrible sound rolling over me like thunder, and the shadows thickened around me, drowning out the light. "See, you are trapped. Nothing can save you from this fate. This is where you belong." Then the air grew thick with memories. It played like a movie, scenes flashing before my eyes, faces distorted with grief, moments of despair stark against flickers of joy. Each fragment weighed down my resolve further, the edges of my spirit eroding slowly. The laughter turned into whispers of those memories, begging me to surrender. "Just give in," they murmured, each voice slithering around my heart like a snake. "Relinquish your fight. It will only hurt you more." An icy sensation gripped me, but instinct kicked in. The warmth of the souls gathered around me flickered, battling against the cold. I focused on them, letting their hope feed my defiance. I raised my arms, reaching outward, summoning their light, their strength to break free from the suffocating roots. With a furious shout, I called forth everything I had. "You are not my end." Waves of light pulsed out from my chest, illuminating the surrounding nightmares, banishing the creeping tendrils of dark that threatened to suffocate. The weight of despair retreated, and the shadows recoiled, shrieks of anger echoing as the light surged forward. In this radiant fire, I could see the lost souls, their faces contorted with anguish, yet slowly transforming with clarity as traces of hope ignited in their eyes. They urged me on, a chorus of gathered strength lifting me up as I fought against my restraints, pulling hard against the roots that still clung to me like desperate hands. The creature writhed, a formless mass lurching in confusion before focusing back on me with renewed hatred. "You will not take them," I cried, a defiance pouring into each word. I surged forward, a beacon igniting within me, burning ever brighter, blinding the shadows that crept ever closer. Then, I witnessed the rooted forms of despair retreating, the voices of my pain dissolving like mist in the morning sun. Panic surged anew as I sensed the creature's next move, feeling the very trees tremble with the weight of its rage. Just as I was about to step back, it lunged, unleashing a torrent of shadows that rushed at me like a tidal wave, seeking to engulf and consume. The soft glow around me flickered in response, wavering as if conflicted by the surge of pure darkness. I steeled myself, heart hammering in my chest as I faced the onslaught, light bursting forth like a shield, breaking the wave of darkness into a myriad of particles that drifted like ash in the air. But still, the shadows regenerated faster, swallowing the light, creeping closer and closer, an ever-looming threat. Embrace the pain, it growled, claws hissing against the air, stretching towards me, fingers extending like gnarled branches of a dead tree. The warmth of my spirit flickered under the weight of its relentless assault. No! I screamed again, feeling despair claw at the edges of my mind, desperate to drag me down. I will not be consumed. Then I remembered the faces of those I loved and the laughter that had once filled my heart, a warmth that pushed back against the chilling fingers of fear and despair. I visualized their smiles, the moments we shared that had woven a tapestry brighter than any shadow, an unstoppable force that came rushing back to me. Just then, as if manipulating time, the creature paused, sensing the shift, and for a fleeting moment, uncertainty crossed its featureless face. The shadows thickened, pulsing aggressively, but I seized my chance. I pulled from the depths of my spirit and thrust the energy outward, transforming it into a blinding light that filled every corner of my being. Enough! I declared, summoning all my will into that single moment. A burst of light erupted from me, fierce and vibrant, flooding the darkness and pushing against the shadows like a shockwave. The impact rippled through the air, and the screech of the creature resonated, imbued with pain, a sound that echoed against the very trees themselves, stirring the forest with a violent wind. In that cataclysm, I glimpsed something else amidst the chaos. The figures of lost souls, illuminated and rising with me, their spirits intertwining with mine as we surged against the dark. We were woven together, a tapestry of light swinging across the landscape like a lighthouse illuminating a storm. The roots began to shatter, splintering like brittle bones, and the shadows writhed, losing their grip on my heart and mind as those precious lives joined my fight. Together, we exploded into the abyss, illuminating every cracked corner of despair, letting the light spill through like a rushing river, sweeping away the darkness. But the creature wasn't finished yet. As the last remnants of its dark form flickered under the onslaught of our collective light, it surged back, viscerally alive with a predatory rage I hadn't seen before. This wasn't just a creature of shadows. It was a force of pure malice, determined to protect its dominion over fear and despair. Fools, it roared, eyes swirling like bottomless pits, glimmering with hatred sharper than any blade. The air trembled with its fury, distorting as if reality itself was bending under the weight of its darkness. You think you can take back what you never owned? You are all mine. It launched forward, a shadowy tempest, tendrils whipping violently, snapping at the edges of the light, splattering darkness like ink across the canvas of my bright aura. I felt the chill roll through me, tendrils coiling like a viper around my chest, squeezing hard enough to make my breath hitch. The souls around me shrieked, their ethereal forms flickering as they fought back against the creature's grasp. Their light, still warm and vivid, began dimming, as if the dark could absorb their hopes and drag them back into the abyss. I couldn't let that happen. I pictured our intertwined beings, our shared resolve, and drew strength from their courage. Together, we could not just survive but push back against the rage. "Gather your strength," I shouted, my voice cutting through the cacophony as I reached deep within myself. feeling the warm pulse of their light mingling with mine. We will not be afraid. In that moment, I sensed a shift in the energy. The way the darkness hissed as I focused more, it felt almost alive, writhing with desperation. The creature could sense its grip faltering. As tendrils lashed out, I anchored my light, weaving it into a protective barrier. The shadows recoiled, screeching as if burned, erupting into smaller chunks of darkness that scattered like frightened bugs. But it was just a tactic, a momentary delay. Its eyes locked onto me, yet the once overwhelming fury shifted into a cold, calculated menace. "You think mere light can drive me away?" it said, voice dripping with disdain. "You are just as much a shadow as I am. I can peel away your light, layer by layer, until nothing remains but your deepest fears." As the forest warped around me, nightmares materialized once again, shadows coiling back into a more tangible form as specters of my past returned. They whispered twisted tales of regret, growing louder and more chaotic. I could feel them clawing at my soul, pulling apart threads of hope I had just woven. "Look at what you really are," a voice echoed through the dark. "You are nothing but abandonment, loneliness, and sorrow. You will never escape that truth." I stumbled back, the sharp words embedding like daggers. And for a moment, doubt seeped into my heart. What if they were right? What if I couldn't escape what had haunted me? The creeping shadows tightened their hold, and as I fought to breathe, the pain of reliving my deepest failures crashed over me. With each vision that passed through, I felt the darkness trying to root its way into my psyche. Memories of rejection, of missing faces, of friendships that faded into the void struck me, biting and clawing for attention. The faces morphed, unsettling distortions creeping into view. Echoes of laughter twisted into mockery, once warm smiles now reflecting my deepest insecurities. But the glow of the souls around me flared, pulsating with renewed strength. They reached out with their ethereal forms, their love breaking through the shadows as my resolve solidified. "We are more than our fears," I screamed loud enough to drown out the whispers. "We are forged in the struggle, and our light still holds power." As I stepped forward, the light grew brighter, pushing against the shadows, igniting my surroundings with a vibrancy that felt tangible. The clawing darkness yielded, trembling back, but not without leaving a stench of fear lingering thick in the air. The creature hissed angrily, its form vibrating with rage as it unleashed a final barrage, shadows whipping out violently to ensnare me. I felt the cold grip of despair wrapping around my heart once more, but determined to stand my ground, I threw up my arms and let the light burst forth unimpeded, refusing to let the darkness consume me. It clashed violently against the encroaching shadows, and for a moment, everything was a blinding maelstrom, light and dark vying against each other in an electric torrent of energy. I could feel the vibrations, the raw power channeling through me as I stood firm against the encroaching darkness, pushing back with each heartbeat. "Together," I urged, turning to the souls beside me. Their faces shimmered brighter as they rallied with me, merging our essence into an unstoppable wave of light that surged against the dark. "We are not alone in this fight." Suddenly, an anguished wail erupted, shuddering through the air as the light clashed with the dark, illuminating the dread-filled forest around us. The shadows buckled under the pressure, dissolving into nothingness, screams fading into silence. But the creature wasn't finished. As the shadows weakened, it shifted tactics, swirling like a storm, enveloping itself in a cloak of darkness, seeking safety within its turmoil. I stood at the helm of light, gathering my strength, feeling the swell of energy erupting around me as the forest began to tremble. In that moment, reality warped, and each breath felt heavy with the weight of impending doom. "Your light will flicker," it taunted, a whisper cold and dripping with malice. "No one can escape what lies within." The shadows surged once more, a wave pulsing outward, trying to penetrate my shield of light. I could feel the souls beside me stand tall, gathering their resolve. each heartbeat pulsing with warmth that invigorated me amidst the chaos. "Fight!" the voices cried, and I clenched my fists, drawing in their strength, our bonds fueling the light that shimmered like a tornado spiraling into the abyss. "Fight!" And in that moment, with everything at stake, I pushed forward, shoving the light deeper into the throbbing mass of darkness, as if piercing the heart of its very essence. But darkness has a way of clinging stubbornly, and I could feel its icy fingers inching closer, threatening to pull me from the safety of light. It swirled around my legs, creeping ever higher, leaving a trail of chilling fear that sent shivers racing through my spine. "Don't let it win!" the voices shouted. The shadows writhed in desperation, splintering momentarily beneath the brightness, but quickly regrouping like a coiled snake ready to strike. I felt my strength waning, each pulse of energy drawing from the depths of my very soul. The swirling darkness relentlessly pressed in, inching closer to suffocating my resolve, feeding off my doubt and fear. It was a chilling realization that I was not just fighting for myself, but for every flicker of hope dimming in the darkness. Together, I roared, forcing the words through gritted teeth. "We are not done." With that, I gathered every ounce of courage, determination surging within me like an unquenchable fire. The shadows hesitated for a moment, sensing the shift in my resolve. Their dark mass pulsed and twisted, creeping closer in frenzied desperation, but I stood firm, refusing to falter. The memories of love and laughter, moments of defiance that had built me into who I was, rushed through my mind, propelling me forward. "Fight back!" I screamed, reaching out for the light that had gathered around me. It felt alive and electric, flowing like a river knitted with hope, love, and connection. As I drew it closer, a shimmering wave erupted, illuminating the darkness, and the very ground shook beneath me. The creature, sensing the abrupt surge, screeched in fury, a sound that echoed through the trees and made each leaf tremble in terror. In its wrath, it unleashed a series of dark tendrils, whipping out with a vengeance, aiming to ensnare and smother whatever light dared to push through its oppressive presence. I felt a cold brush against my skin, an icy caress of fear that made my heart race. Each tendril felt like needles stabbing into my skin, latching onto my weaknesses, tugging at my soul, a desperate attempt to pry apart the light from the darkness. Panic swelled inside me, but I held tight to the threads of the souls beside me, feeling their hope meld with my own. I understood now that the darkness thrived on fear, and by acknowledging it, I could wrestle control back. "Together!" I shouted again, a rallying cry full of conviction. I thrust my palm forward, feeling a surge of warmth erupt from within me, cascaded into the rushing light. It burst forth like a sun breaking through the darkest of nights, throwing shadows backward with a reverberating energy that shook the ground beneath our feet. It collided with the shadow mass, a blinding flash that illuminated the twisted woods, spiraling outward like a beacon of hope. For a fleeting moment, I saw the dark creature's expression shift, an unmistakable flicker of fear reflected in its depths as the light expanded like roots beneath the earth, stretching far and wide. But the darkness struck back, drowning my burst of courage, rushing in like a tidal wave. I gasped, fighting to breathe as shadows swallowed the warmth, wrapping cold fingers around my throat, squeezing tightly. Faces of lost moments rushed back to me, faces twisted in pain, mocking my attempt to break free. "Look at you," the creature hissed, its voice now thick with glee. "You cannot escape. Your light is only a flicker against the depths of this abyss." Just as despair began to cloud my thoughts, a memory flickered, a kind voice, a smile that filled my heart, reminding me that strength comes from support, from the bonds we create. I closed my eyes, drawing on that warmth, and suddenly I felt it surge back. Every spirit that had stood with me pulled their energy into one final, vibrant pulse, cloaking me in a veil of warmth. I opened my eyes wide and faced the monstrous creature, feeling each soul beside me form a protective barrier, shielding me from the biting edge of despair. "No!" the creature roared, twisting violently as my own light began to push back against its darkness. "You cannot!" But the light only grew brighter, illuminating every twisted corner of the forest, transforming the shadows that surrounded us into swirling echoes, fading one by one. The scream of the creature grew louder, vibrating through the air, a cacophony of pure rage ripping through the night. As shadows thinned, revealing glimpses of lost souls finally breaking free, I felt a powerful surge run through me, drawing on the combined strength of the light. With one final thrust of energy, I unleashed a blinding wave, powerful enough to shatter any lingering despair, washing over the entire forest. In a deafening explosion, darkness collapsed inward, swallowed by light. The creature's form flickered, fraying at the edges as the last remnants of its grip dissolved under the weight of collective hope. Screams of defeat echoed, growing fainter as the forest illuminated with a radiant pulse of light and life. Finally, it shattered into millions of fragments, scattering like ash in the wind, leaving nothing but silence in its wake. The warmth flooded through me, and I stood there breathing heavily, filled with an overwhelming sense of relief. The trees around me glowed softly, the night lifting, revealing the myriad stars overhead, twinkling like whispers of hope. In that moment, the tingling warmth wrapped around me, a protective embrace from the souls who fought beside me. "You did it," they whispered in unison, their voices soft and soothing like a blanket in the cold night. I could almost see their forms, spectral lights dancing happily, grateful for the courage I had found within myself amid the chaos. But deep inside, I knew this gift of light came with a cost. The memory of the creature lingered. Its whispers echoed softly in the back of my mind. "You can still be consumed." I shivered but let my heart settle as I recalled the warmth of their light. While the dark could return, it would never have the power to hold me again. Every shadow would be faced with the strength built from love and connection. I had fought, and I would always fight. Walking through the now peaceful forest, I felt tethered to the souls that had rallied beside me. We were forever linked by the strife we endured and the light that guided us. I felt stronger than ever, knowing fear would always be a part of me, but it would never define me again. The battle had concluded, but the journey of healing and embracing the light ahead lay waiting. As I stepped through the trees, the sensation of raw power surged through me, vibrating against my fingertips. It was a reminder, an echo of victory and love, a silent promise that would guide me through the darkest nights, for I would never stand alone again. And I was certain this was merely the beginning.